The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeats.com. And welcome to the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading an excerpt from Robert Wolfe's book, Original Wisdom, Stories of an Ancient Way of Knowing. I wrote the foreword for it. Robert Wolfe just died just a few months ago, just this last year, in Hawaii. Louise and I visited him there a number of times. He was in his 90s. And back in the 1950s, he was an anthropologist and sociologist who had been hired by the Malaysian government to figure out why this one particular Aboriginal tribe, the Sonoy, who lived deep inside the jungle, hunting-gathering tribe, why they were, quote, lazy, why they were unwilling to work in the rubber plantations. And he got to know them, and he discovered that their view of the world was completely different than ours. And that's essentially what this book is about, and it's absolutely a mind-boggling book. I'll share a little. This is from the middle of the book. This is page 86. It's finally he's reached the point where they'll let him sleep in the village with them. He says, in time, I grew to know them better. But it was when I began to overnight in their villages that I learned that they literally lived in another reality. When it became dark, people huddled together for warmth and companionship. In the tropics, there's no long period of dusk. It grows dark quickly. The air would become cool, and people would move closer together, reaching out, touching a neighbor, perhaps holding hands. Women might run their fingers through the hair of the person sitting next to them. During the nights I stayed over, they would often gather around me and have me ask them questions. Then they would ask me questions, very quietly and softly. Our being together was not like other social situations I'd ever experienced. We talked, but softly. They did not know how to compete for attention. A few words now and then were all that were spoken, a question or a comment, a simple answer, long silences. Sometimes someone would have some tobacco and light a cigarette, a tobacco rolled into a leaf, which was passed around the group. People might ask each other whether they had noticed that particularly bright patch of sunlight on the side of the river behind a certain tree, or if they had noticed that large yellow bird that sang in the morning. Evening was a time of reflection, of gentle communication, of being together. I never knew their blood relationships, but evening times felt like family. As it grew later, one of the people would get up to go into one of the houses, more often little more than lean-tos or rickety huts on stilts, and fall asleep. Eventually, each of us had found an empty spot on the floor of one of the shelters, and wrapped in our sarongs, we huddled close to whoever else slept in that house that night. The houses did not belong to anyone. It seemed that each of the 4 or 5 little shelters was for all the people living in that settlement at that moment. We would fall asleep whenever we chose, and I'm sure with whomever we wanted to spend the night. Yes, people had sex, but even that was gentle, quiet, and discreet. Occasionally, someone might turn over and bump into a couple being a little too acrobatic or noisy, and there would be a grunt. Or people might move away from a couple that made too much to do about their lovemaking. Passionate lovemaking between young people often took place during the day, outside in a more hidden spot in the jungle, I was told. In the morning, we might not all wake up at the same time, but those who woke up early would lay quietly, waiting for more people to awaken. And somehow, as if by magic, we would find ourselves sitting in a circle, rubbing our eyes, stretching the kinks out. One person would say, I saw a bird, a beautiful bird. Someone else would say, yes, I too saw a bird. What kind of bird was it? Another would ask. And so they would create a story with images from our dreams. They did not think that they were sharing dreams as we think of dreams. The Sonoy believed that the world we live in is a shadow world, and that the real world is behind it. At night, they believe, we visit the real world. In the morning, we share what we saw and learned there. The story that was created around the memories that 4 or 5 people brought back from the real world set the tone for that day. Sometimes one of the group would take the lead in soliciting input from each person in the room. How about you? What do you remember? Other times, the story flowed without help. A few times, no story emerged at all. It was very obvious that when a more or less coherent story was created around the images we shared, we who had slept in that shelter would live that story that day. Usually the stories were simple. A bird had shown the way to a tree that was bearing fruit. Later that day, some of us would find that tree, and of course it did have ripe fruit. Or the story was about a bad storm, so people would stay close to the shelters all day, and yes, there was a big storm in the late afternoon. Occasionally the stories were about things that affected all of them, all the people in the settlement, or perhaps even all the Sonoy. In that case, they would make it a point to share with the people who had slept in other shelters as soon as possible. It might take all morning to disseminate that story to everyone. I did not witness any attempts to call a meeting, but it was obvious that when a serious story came out of a morning's dream telling, all the people in the settlement would eventually hear that story. I learned about all of this very early during the time that I spent with the Sonoy. It was in what I thought of as the first village, the first settlement I visited, that an important story emerged from what I brought back from the real world during one of my nights there. It made a big impression on me because part of the story came from my dream. It was a particularly vivid dream about one of my family's dogs, an all-black mongrel that seemed to have come with the house we rented in the suburbs of Kuala Lumpur. We had tried to get rid of that dog. In fact, one of the first days after we moved we had run over to over the poor dog in the driveway, but he would not leave. We tried chasing him away. He kept coming back. So we adopted him and called him Jaga, which is Malay for guard or protector. I do not remember that Jaga was a particularly good watchdog, but he was around. And he goes on to tell his dream, and then it's just an absolutely fascinating story. Original Wisdom, Stories of an Ancient Way of Knowing by Robert Wolfe.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you, and so happy to be with you on this beautiful Friday. Well, it's actually kind of gray here in D.C., but still, you know, it's every day you wake up breathing is a good day. Speaking of waking up breathing, the Montana House today, this was actually a couple of days ago, this was February 28th. So earlier this week, the Montana House gave initial approval, that would be what, Monday, I think? Gave initial approval to a bill that would allow the state to execute doctors for writing a prescription for aid in dying medication for terminally ill adults who requested it to peacefully end their suffering. Called HB 536. It passed the Montana House by a vote of 52 to 48. It was introduced by Brad Shinda, Tschida, Shida, from Missoula. And physician aid in dying is not a defense to a charge of homicide against the aiding physician, a maximum sentence of the death penalty and a minimum sentence of 10 years in prison. You know, we were talking last week about death with dignity. That's amazing. By the way, it's Anything Goes Friday. We have no guests today. Whatever if there's anything on your mind that you'd like to talk about, whether it's lizard people, are there lizard people in the White House? People who zip on their human suits every day? Oh, you didn't know about Sean Spicer? Speaking about zipping suits on, I just learned this morning. Troy and Chris were like, look at this story. Sean Spicer used to be the Easter Bunny on the White House lawn. There's a picture of the Easter Bunny with George W. Bush. It's Sean Spicer. Yes, seriously. In fact, there's a tweet. I retweeted a couple tweets of it this morning. So, at least Sean Spicer zips on his Easter Bunny suit. But here's the question. We used to speculate about Dick Cheney. He doesn't have a heartbeat. I mean, what's the deal here? Does he zip on his human suit every day? This, of course, goes back to, what's the British conspiracy theorist's name? It's been a decade since I've even thought about the guy. David, it's one of those names that sounds like a different name. In any case, who came up with this theory that these lizard people live in the center of the earth and they come out periodically and they run society, right? They're the secret rulers of the world. Well, say that again? Yeah, David Icke's. Yeah, David Ikes, I think is how he pronounces it, Ikes. I'm not even sure he's still alive, but back, geez, must have been 15 or 20 years ago, Louise and I went to this conference in Los Angeles. It was like one of these New Age conferences where they had all these different, breakout sessions. And we walked into this room, and I had, at that point, I had no idea who David Ikes was, and he was speaking. And, we walked into this room and sat down. There's maybe 200-300 people in there. And he's going through the history of the Egyptian Empire and the building of the pyramids, and then to the Masons and the origins of the Masonic Order. And George Washington's inaugural address was a Masonic Day parade. And I'm following along. I mean, it's really kind of fascinating world history about how, the medieval guilds that came out of the Renaissance, the 14th century. After the deaths of the Black Plague, those guilds became unions, and they became also the Masons, and they became secret societies and all kinds of stuff. And then he starts talking about the lizard people. And everybody in the room, I'm looking at Louise going, what happened? And everybody in the room is going, They're just following right along. Yep, and the lizard people have set this stuff up way back, thousands of years ago. And you can find the lizard people in the Bible. And he's going through Eric von Daniken's, Chariots of the Gods thing, if you're old enough to remember when that was a New York Times bestseller back in the 70s, I think it was. And, it's got all these pictures of space aliens and whatnot, that we find on archaeological sites. And so, anyhow, I'm not saying I want to talk about that today, but what the heck? I think I just did. All right, a couple of things I wanted to share with you before we pick up your phone calls. This CBS San Francisco. This is the CBS San Francisco station. Sanfrancisco.cbslocal.com is the website. The headline: Cell phone radiation exposure fact sheet draft released for California health officials. And it had been previously unpublished. It was just published. It was dated April 2014, but it never made it out. And this guy sued the state. His name is Maskowitz. And he sued the state to get this document. Joel Maskowitz, PhD, director of the Center for Family and Community Health at UC Berkeley School of Public Health. And the draft fact sheet, in the draft fact sheet, I'm quoting here from the CBS site, state health officials list the recommendations for members of the public who wish to reduce their exposure to the radiation emitted from cell phones. They say used frequently and kept close to the head and body, cell phone electro EMFs, that's a radiation, can affect nearby cells and tissues. The fact sheet also says, and I quote, EMFs can pass deeper into a child's brain than in adults, and so they suggest parents limit their cell phone use to texting, important calls, and emergencies, and that you use speakerphones and headphones. Whoa, seriously. Arkansas has introduced a bill to ban books by Howard Zinn, the author of A People's History of the United States, which is arguably, one of the best history books that I've ever read. I mean, it's just, but oh my God, we can't have a real history book, can we? And, the stock market hit this 21,000, the Dow hit this 21,000 never before hit mark yesterday, the day before. Oh, I guess it was the day before yesterday. And yesterday it kind of flattened out. And there's a lot of speculation about where is this going. And this is the story yesterday. I kept saying, I got an economic story I want to share. I never got to it. I want to share it with you today. This is from the Financial Times day before yesterday. U.S. banks have hit the brakes on lending since Donald Trump's election in November. Now, you go back to 2007 and you look at the anatomy of the crash and you see that there was no shortage of warning signs. And in my mind, the biggest warning sign was the fact that there were ads running on radio and television, number one, for refi your home, and get all the money out of your home, which is not a good idea, but it was selling like crazy. And number two, for these seminars about how you can become a multimillionaire yourself using leverage and real estate. So you buy a house and you mortgage the entire thing and you pull a little money out of the house and you buy another house and you basically become a landlord. And over time, you take that landlord money and you put it back into the houses to pay the mortgages, and the mortgage, and the houses become assets. And, it's a great system that actually does work unless there's a crash coming. And in fact, if anything, what it did was it fed the bubble that became the crash. So that, that was back in 2007 when I started refusing to read those ads. I was on a local radio station in Portland and saying, you know, we had a mortgage company as an advertiser, and I was like, I'm not going to do it anymore because I think that this is a disaster waiting to happen, and I don't think these people are behaving ethically. And it turned out I was right. But not necessarily about those individual advertisers, but just the industry in general. So here's back to the Financial Times. Total outstanding bank loans have dipped for 2 consecutive months, with declines in December and January, ever since the election. This is from information that the Fed published day before yesterday. Rohit Arora, a co-founder of Biz2 Credit, which arranges loans for small businesses, says January was slow, February is slower. Political uncertainty has gone up so much since Trump came in. This is not a story you're going to hear on Fox News, but you can read it in the Financial Times. David Rosenberg, chief economist at Gluskin Scuff, said the recent lending data had sent a shiver up my spine. He said lending to commerce and industry have, quote, fallen off the cliff. The chief international economist at Deutsche Bank Securities, Thorsten Schlock, said, quote, I'm getting more and more questions from clients like this because people are beginning to pay attention. If everything's so great, why is credit growth slowing? And then toward the end of the article, Alistair Gray in New York, who wrote the article for the Financial Times, says analysts at banks are now tightening underwriting standards, partly in response to rising delinquency levels. Another bad sign. The U.S. credit card default rate hit 3.21% last month, the highest level since January 2013. Residential mortgage loan growth was close to zero in November and December and declined 0.7% last month, which again is what we saw just as the housing market started to burst in early 2008. So, you know, some things to be concerned about. I think so. I think it's entirely possible. So anyhow, that said, we'll take your calls, whatever you'd like to talk about. It's Anything Goes Friday. We'll pick up your calls right after this. Stick around. And yeah, we can talk about lizard people if you want. You know, although, you think they're real? I mean, Dick Cheney made a good argument for it. Do that.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Anything Goes Friday. Stick around. Anything Goes Friday. Welcome back. Mary in Redondo Beach, California, watching us on Free Speech TV. Hey, Mary, what's on your mind today?
Hi, I had a question about lying to Congress. I had been learned years ago, that when anyone appears before Congress, whether or not they are under oath, if they lie, it's a felony. And now I'm hearing the opposite, that it's not a felony unless
you're sworn in.
Yeah. Do you know what the definitive thing is? They refer to criminal law number 18 U.S.C. 1621.
Right.
And then 18 U.S.C. 1001. But I can't find anywhere to substantiate what I heard before, that lying to Congress is a felony, period.
Right. I'm not sure that it is. And if it were, there's a lot of people. Well, actually, I mean, you look back at the tobacco executives. They actually were sworn under oath. They actually raised their hand and took the oath and swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. And then they lied through their teeth. But of course, they were all white billionaires, and so not only did they not go to jail, they probably got a bonus.
Yeah.
But my understanding, Mary, is that if you're testifying before Congress and you're not under oath, that it's not a crime to lie, but there could be some penalties. But I'm not a lawyer and I'm not an expert on this, so I honestly don't know. I do know that it is a crime punishable by up to 5 years to lie under oath, including before Congress. I mean, that's perjury. And that's clearly what Scott Pruitt committed. He committed perjury. It's clearly what Jeff Sessions did. He committed perjury. Yes. Both of these guys lied under oath in congressional testimony that had to do with their being inaugurated or their being, what's the word?
Confirmed?
Yeah, confirmed. Thank you very much, Mary. Confirmed as members of the president's cabinet. So,
Okay.
And to the best of my knowledge, Spicer has not yet lied about being the Easter Bunny. So,
Oh, gosh,
I
I
don't
wouldn't
know.
put it past him.
Yeah, it's pretty strange. Okay, Mary, thanks a lot for the call. I'm sorry I don't have the definitive answer for you. I'll check the chat room during the break at the bottom of the hour. Maybe somebody there knows. Sue very often tracks that kind of stuff down. Mary, thank you for the call. Ernie in Augusta, Georgia. Ernie, we have a minute to the break. What's up?
Yeah, I have a way out scenario, Tom. I'm a first-time caller. I think that they're so far in bed with the Russians, all this scandal that's swirling around the Trump administration, that he might get impeached. And I think Republicans will get on board because they want Pence in there anyway.
Yeah.
Somebody that thinks like him. You know what I mean? So Donald might be getting impeached once all this, because I think he's real deep in bed with the Russians. That's my thought. What do you think?
I honestly don't know, and we have yet to see any actual evidence, which is kind of problematic. But I do totally agree with you that the Republicans, they love Donald Trump right now because he's popular, and he's very, very good at manipulating at least the Republican electorate. And Fox News is totally behind him, so they're walking carefully right now. But if he starts stumbling badly, they will pile on him so fast because, as you said, Mike Pence is an old-fashioned Republican. He hates gay people. He likes to keep women in their place. His record on race is, well, whatever it is. So, they would much rather have Pence. I agree with you. I agree with your analysis, Ernie. Thanks a lot for the call. We'll be back.
This year's election results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions.
But there is good news.
There is good news.
There is good news. Thousands of people are stepping forward in solidarity, resistance,
and resolve.
We join them.
We join them.
We join them
in standing with the most vulnerable communities among us.
Those most likely to be targeted by new restrictions and policies.
We will tell their stories here.
Here
on Free Speech TV.
We will lift their voices here
on Free Speech TV.
In the difficult times ahead, know that we will be with you
24 hours a day.
Every day.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
There are millions of us.
Raising our voices and hearts together as one.
We've got your back.
We got your back.
Free Speech TV's got your back.
The revolution is in progress.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Just a couple other quick things. There's so much cool stuff here that I have to share it with you, and then I'll pick up your calls. I see where our board is filling up here with Anything Goes calls. Anything Goes Friday. But this treasure hunt on the Hill, this is from Victoria Jones, publishes a daily newsletter from the talkmedianews.com site, and anybody can sign up for it if you just go over to Talk Media News. And I find it the best news summary that I use every day. It's just, Victoria just does a spectacular job. And this one is about the Obamacare replacement, right? The headline is Treasure Hunt on the Hill. She writes, a Republican draft bill to replace Obamacare is reportedly hidden somewhere on Capitol Hill on the House side. And on Thursday morning, it was yesterday morning, legislators and reporters ended up on a bipartisan wild goose chase to find it. She says this is the most fun any of them have had in years. Republicans have been drafting a plan to replace the Affordable Care Act. Wednesday, news outlets reported that some GOP legislators would have the first chance to look at the bill on Thursday. And the briefings would be secretive. Members couldn't receive copies of the bill. The copies would remain locked in an undisclosed room for members to look at. Democratic House members and senators of all stripes were not to be included, but by Thursday morning, they were revolting. The draft bill was rumored to be in House room number 157, a nondescript meeting room. When legislators showed up, Capitol Police were guarding the entrance. And this is so funny. Rand Paul gets over there and he stands out front and he holds a press conference in front of the room. And then Paul Tanco, Democrat from New York, comes. Kevin Brady from Texas, Republican from Texas, comes out of the room from a meeting and says, there's no bill in there. Sorry, guys. And Frank Pallone, a Democrat from New Jersey, Jan Schakowsky, Democrat from Illinois, led a group of reporters on a sort of scavenger hunt to the Energy and Commerce's main hearing room and through a Capitol basement. And after Ron Paul left, House Minority Whip Steny Hoyer, the Democrat from Maryland, arrived, trailed by a Facebook live streaming staff and reporters. And Hoyer and the press made it to the room empty. He says, well, Mr. Lincoln, I can't find the bill, turning to a bust of President Lincoln. He says, I know, Mr. Lincoln, you're upset with your party as I am. Yeah. Very strange stuff. Very strange stuff. And Donald Trump's assault on our environment, 40 days in just 40 days, Donald Trump has made it easier. This from Politico by Andrew Restucia, excuse me. In just 40 days, Donald Trump has made it easier for coal miners to dump their waste into West Virginia streams. He has ordered the repeal of Clean Water Act protections for vast stretches of wetlands. He's proposed massive job cuts at the Environmental Protection Agency, and he's prepared to begin revoking the Obama administration's most ambitious climate change regulations. He's also expected to overturn Barack Obama's moratorium on new federal coal leases and is considering automakers' pleas for relief from a scheduled tightening of vehicle fuel efficiency standards. Obama's pledge to send billions to the United Nations climate programs is likely also in the chopping block. Christine Todd Whitman, she the one who told 9/11 first responders, it's no problem, go in, breathe the air, it's fine. She says, I've never really seen anything quite like this. A lot of that enforcement is protecting people. Oh, suddenly Christy Whitman wants to protect people. Amazing stuff. And finally, and then we'll hit the break here at the bottom of the hour and I'll pick up your calls. But finally, this from CBSNews.com. This is from Kathy Kristoff. Money Watch is the column. And this is from today. A group of 7 Senate Republicans, excuse me, I'm sorry, this is from several weeks ago. A group of 7 Senate Republicans are moving to gut consumer protections for prepaid credit cards before they're even enacted. The rules, which are aimed at providing many of the same safeguards that we take for granted on credit cards, would require fee disclosures, fraud protections, and limits on overdraft fees. In other words, you can't rip off people who have prepaid cards anymore. But Republicans are saying, no, we're going to do away with that. Consumer advocates said that the resolution is a thinly veiled giveaway to NetSpend, a controversial issuer of prepaid cards. They could potentially lose up to $80 million annually in overdraft fees imposed largely on low-income buyers of their prepaid cards. They were sued by the FTC for deceptive marketing practices. Wow. So this company is trying to save $80 million in profit. So what do? Pass out $4 or $5 million of it among Republicans? Senate Republicans.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
I mean, this is the formula here in Washington, D.C. Buy yourself a senator for $50,000 or $100,000 and make $80 million in profit as a result of their legislation. Donald Trump, first he came after the Mexicans. And most white Republican families don't have any Mexicans, so they didn't care. Then he came after the Muslims, and most white Republican families don't have any Muslims and don't even know any, so they didn't care. And then he went after gay people, and most white Republican families have gay people but don't know it. Then he went after disabled people. And most white Republican families don't have any disabled people, and so they didn't care. And then he went after prisoners of war, John McCain, and most white Republican families don't have any prisoners of war, and so they didn't care. And then he went after white women, saying he could grab them in the crotch whenever he wanted, and because he was a star. And all of a sudden, all these white Republicans all across the country said, oh, my God, I've got a white wife, a white daughter, a white mother, and Donald Trump just went over the top. Now, for the rest of us, he went over the top when he started with the Mexicans. Now, I mean, maybe that's because my niece is married to a fellow who's Mexican. I'm literally Mexican. But I don't think so. I think it's because I'm a human being and I'm capable of feeling empathy. Gay people, we all have gay people in our family, disabled people. I had a niece who was severely disabled. But, it's not about me. I mean, my point is that there's some real selective hysteria here. Meanwhile, Trump is saying, oh, this was just locker room banter. This was just locker room banter. Well, Donald Trump and Billy Bush Billy Bush is George W. Bush's nephew. They were a cousin, one or the other. And they were both born into dynasties. They were both born into very, very wealthy families, Donald Trump and Billy Bush. And I have to say, I mean, Louise grew up with a brother. I grew up with 3 brothers. I have never in my life heard a man brag about attacking women, about sexually assaulting women. Never heard it. Never. The kind of talk that Trump engaged in, where he talked about his ability to sexually assault women without consequence because of his fame and wealth, I've never heard before. And I don't think most men have, frankly. Now, the locker room stuff, you could argue, was the earlier stuff that with him and Billy Bush. And Billy Bush is getting all this fallout, all this, and he's been taken off to the Today Show this week and everything else. And, he was sucking up to Donald. And he participated in what you could arguably call locker room banter, which is, hey, look at her, isn't she hot kind of stuff. That's a different thing than saying that one can simply basically attack women, just walk up to them and grab them by the crotch. It's just, which is what. So this is Billy Bush and Donald Trump engaging in what you might call locker room banter. But anyhow, your thoughts on this here. Let's play this.
She's your girl's hottest in the purple.
Whoa.
Yes.
Whoa.
Yes, the Donald has scored.
Whoa.
Oh, my man. Look at those legs. All I can see is the legs.
No, it looks good.
Come on, Shorty.
Oh, nice legs, huh?
Oof, get out of the way, honey. Oh, that's good legs.
Yeah, nice legs, right? Good legs. Okay. That probably qualifies as locker room banter. And I have heard that kind of language before, and I think probably most men have. And I'm guessing that a lot of women have heard women sizing up men the same way. But then, and I'm not going to play the clip, but then Trump goes off on his, I can do anything I want to, or that he can do anything he wants to women. And that's where it went off the rails. And that is not locker room banter. That is bragging about sexual assault. Now, last night he said he's never done that. A bunch of women had come forward and said that he did. His defense: here's women that Bill Clinton assaulted. Well, A, that's not proven, but whether it's true or not is irrelevant. Bill Clinton isn't running for president. In fact, Bill Clinton got impeached over something close to that kind of behavior. Paid the price for it. But Donald Trump is running for president right now. And he clearly carries these, at least in my opinion, clearly carries these misogynistic perspectives, worldview, and this sense of entitlement, of absolute entitlement. That, well, in fact, we saw it on display last night, in particular during the debate, when Trump went off on how he could basically, he was going to put Hillary Clinton in jail. I don't have time for the clip right now, but this is the same thing. I mean, this is, he's a tough guy. He's a bully guy. And do you really, let me say to Trump supporters out there, do you really want a bully, a misogynist? Do you really want that caliber of person in the White House? Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Brian, Chris, and I are having way too much fun. Lizard people? Really? Oh? Matt in Chicago. Hey, Matt, what's on your mind today?
Hello, Tom. Thank you for taking my call.
My pleasure.
So I'm asking honestly, but I'm going to quote a line from Stephanie Miller for this. How long do you think it'll be before Sean Spicer gets led away in a straitjacket? I actually feel slightly bad for this man.
I do too.
He's still awful, but the fact that he's got to be the voice of this administration, I feel terrible for this guy. He's going to explode soon.
In a way, being the White House Easter Bunny, it was perfect training for what he's doing right now for Donald Trump. I mean, it's like, oh, I'm sorry. I should not laugh. I'm sure it's a marvelous, honorable, and wonderful thing to be the White House Easter Bunny. But yeah, I feel sorry for Spicer too. And apparently Trump is one of these kiss up, kick down people. His particular personality type that I've noticed over the years, where if they perceive you as being more powerful than them, then they become obsequious. They really suck up to you. If they perceive you as having less power than them, then they become dismissive and contemptuous and kick down, right? Kiss up, kick down. And Trump apparently goes on rages against his staff, and as is common in the business world, by the way. I mean, the business world is the world of these little kingdoms. So I don't know. Are you seeing any evidence, Matt, that he's about to blow up?
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was going to say running a country is not a business, though.
That's correct. It's a very, very different thing. And that's why typically when you get businessmen running the country, the last two we had were Herbert Hoover and George W. Bush. Surprise, surprise, get Great Depressions. You get economic crashes. Yeah, Matt, we should all have a moment of silence and say a prayer for poor Sean Spicer and for his soul, because
you have a great weekend, Tom.
Yeah, thank you. You too, Matt. He may not make it through this, spiritually intact. Stephen in Indianapolis. Hey, Stephen, what's on your mind today?
Automatic. Hey, thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
I am not really a conspiracy theorist. I don't like to call myself a conspiracy theorist.
But
I am wondering, I look at all the polls and everything else, or you don't even have to look at polls, but I see people that are so divided nowadays,
Mm-hmm.
And do you think we could be on the verge of a second revolution?
No.
Or something like that.
No, our violent revolution. Well, actually, we've had two, arguably. One was our separation from England, and the other was, a group of Southerners who wanted to preserve slavery, saying that if they couldn't do that, they were going to separate from the United States. But the first one was the result of our being occupied. And I kept pointing this out during Bush's invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq. Where I said nobody wants their country to be occupied. We have occupied those two countries now since 2002, 2003 for Iraq. And that's like 14, 15 years. I mean, that's crazy. Nobody wants their country to be occupied. And as the people who we think of as the framers and founders, this was several generations of being born on this continent. As they started thinking of themselves as North Americans rather than Europeans, they viewed the Brits as occupiers. But I think that the biggest problem that we have is the core of conservative politics is that the actual core of conservative politics is to be a complete sellout to billionaires and big corporations, to take advantage of the Supreme Court's decisions from Santa Clara County to Buckley to Bilotti to Citizens United, and own your own politician. And if you're a conservative politician, you have to be owned by somebody. I mean, it's just like that's the definition, basically. Whose pocket are you in? Virtually all the Republicans are getting enough money from the fossil fuel industry that they will deny climate change. They're getting enough money from the gun industry that they will deny that having a gun in your home raises the risk that you or your children will die. They're getting enough money from the pharmaceutical industry that they're going to fight like tooth and nail to prevent, drugs from being imported from Canada, or for that matter, to prevent Medicare from being able to negotiate prices for pharmaceuticals, which would save us $600 billion every decade, $60 billion a year. So, but the problem is that's the actual functional definition of conservative is sellout. But the problem is you can't campaign for office on that. You've got to campaign for office on something else. And so what Fox So-Called News does and Right Wing Hate Radio does is establish grievance. And the essential core, and Stephen, thanks a lot for the call. I'm going to just go off on a rant about this. The essential core of conservatism now is grievance politics. It's, those people are doing it to us, right? They are taking, rich people's tax money. Oh my God, they're interfering with businesses' God-given right to pour pollution into our rivers. And this has, this grievance politics. Literally, it's just amazing. Louise and I do a fair amount of channel surfing, and we'll watch, MSNBC, and they'll be talking about something. Usually, it's actually topical or issue-based. You flip to CNN, it's usually, train wrecks and tinkly things. No Donald Trump Russia dossier jokes intended. You tune it, but you tune into Fox, and they're reciting a grievance. This illegal aliens murdered this poor woman's son, or Democrats didn't stand for the flag, or it was something, right? It's a grievance. And those grievances now have become embedded in the minds of, quote, conservative voters. I call them suckers. These poor people in the United States who vote for Republicans because they're convinced that those grievances are legitimate. Brown people are robbing and raping and pillaging, and black people are trying to take your jobs, and oh my God, white America, run in the other direction, and all this grievance and fear stuff. And the consequence of that is that people shoot, as this guy did the other day in somewhere in the Midwest. What was it, Kansas? Olathe, Kansas. That's right, Olathe, Kansas. Shot these two Indian engineers. Dead. Well, one of them dead. And the other, and now people in India are going, holy cow, do not go to the United States. So this is what it leads to. And this is one of the reasons, in my opinion, why more people have been killed by right-wingers, white Christian right-wingers in the United States than by any other group since 9/11. They're killing us, literally, because they're so frightened, because Fox News and Right Wing Hate Radio are scaring the crap out of them. So anyhow, Alan, for political purposes, Alan in Kirkland, Washington. Hey, Alan, what's on your mind?
Happy Friday, Tom.
Thank you. Back at you, Alan.
I hope you're great and getting better today.
I am. What's on your mind?
Well, my mind is a Dow Jones average that you discussed earlier.
Mm-hmm.
I'm old enough to remember when the phrase high tide floats all boats was put out there as a way of saying what's good for business is good for the average worker.
Yeah, that was Jack Kennedy's
phrase.
True
anymore.
Yeah, I agree. What Jack Kennedy said was a rising tide lifts all boats. And the only problem with that is if you don't have a boat, a rising tide will simply drown you. And, more and more Americans don't have a boat.
And so what I'd like to do, as you describe yourself as a serial entrepreneurist, that I'm going to throw out a business idea. Someone needs to start a average Joe average and have quite a lot of metrics embedded into it. The cost of food, the wages, life expectancy, educational degrees per capita, et cetera, and each time, maybe not do it daily, but weekly, as the farm reports come out, et cetera, you actually post from what the average Joe is getting in America today.
Sort of like the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists clock, where here's kind of the aggregate number that we're a minute away from doomsday. The average Joe is now 10 minutes below, or 10 degrees below, or $10 below where he would have been in '68. That kind of thing. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, exactly that. You pick a baseline where we were all doing pretty good, and and call that 20,000 points, like today's Dow Jones average.
Right.
And then go from there.
Right. Whereas the average Joe right now is at 4,000, probably.
Yeah, exactly right. And show that it goes up when Democrats get their policies in, and it goes down when Republicans get their policies in.
Yeah, let me give you a place to start on this. If you go to a website called politicsthatwork.com, you will find half the graphs that you're talking about right now. It's just an amazing website, politicsthatwork.com. But Andy, or Alan, excuse me, I think that you've identified what could be a great little, home business. Thanks a lot for the call.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be back with more of your calls on Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program in just a moment. And welcome back. Skip in Seattle, Washington. Hey, Skip, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I'm trying to get through The Revolution of 1800, yours and Sisson's book. And I probably should have finished reading it before calling you and asking, what do you see as similar to 1790 and today in our own culture? And is that undercurrent of revolution building to the point where I can look forward to it before I croak? I'm in my 70s.
I wouldn't call it revolution as in, the American Revolution, but the Jefferson Revolution. I mean, he referred to that election as the Second American Revolution. And it was referred that way for, basically the rest of his lifetime. I mean, it wasn't until the 1830s, 1840s that phrase fell out of popular usage. So, the Second American Revolution to describe the election of 1800. I think that we're in a revolutionary moment. I think that Ronald Reagan was a revolutionary, just like FDR was a revolutionary. FDR took us in a very, very different direction. We've been going down this libertarian road for generations. And Reagan said, and FDR said, no, that libertarian road has destroyed our economy, it's destroyed our people. We are going to create a government that is of, by, and for we the people, not just of, by, and for the billionaires. And he did it. And LBJ expanded on it with the Great Society. And then Reagan came along and said, no, we're going to have a counter-revolution. We're going to take that apart. And he started taking it apart. And then George Herbert Walker Bush and then George W. Bush and now Donald Trump all took even more of it apart. And frankly, Bill Clinton took part of it apart. And President Obama did not put much of it back together again, although, again, he was blocked at every turn by the Republicans, but still. So I think that's why people elected Donald Trump. They want change. And I think, frankly, if the Democratic candidate had been as perceived as a change candidate, Hillary Clinton very much was instead perceived as part of the old guard. If she'd been perceived as a change candidate, I think she would have handily won the election.
Was the population of 1790 or thereabouts better informed about governance as we look at it today than our current population, bulk of our population, say, aside from the great generation or us baby boomers? Are the younger generations as well informed about how our government was intended to work as the people of 1790?
Well, no. And for this, I refer you to Alexis de Tocqueville's book, Democracy in America, which is just a startling read. It was, as I recall, 1836. He was a young French noble. He was in his 30s. He came to the United States and spent 6 months here traveling around the East Coast and the Midwest, as far as west as Tennessee, I think, as I recall. And what he found was that he could walk up to any farmer in his field and have a conversation about French politics, which just blew his mind, how well-informed the average American was. And now, obviously, it was the average white American at that point in time, but still, the electorate was well-informed. The electorate, I think, today is not well-informed. And were it not for social media, it would be a real disaster. I mean, Texas has edited their school books now twice in the last decade. Once to take out George Washington and insert Rush Limbaugh. I mean, it's amazing what's going on. And we don't teach civics anymore in a meaningful way. And now with Betsy DeVos, you're going to see more and more schools that are just teaching right-wing Christian fundamentalism rather than actual history. So, yeah, I think it might be a revolutionary time, Skip. I really do. Thank you for the call. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Tony in Las Vegas, Nevada. Hey, Tony, what's on your mind today?
Hey, just longtime fan, and I love what you do.
Thank you.
Thought it was funny. I want to keep things on the lighter side with David Icke. I listened to a podcast, and they just recently read David Icke's The Biggest Secret.
Oh, really?
And it goes in, really big, and they divulge every chapter.
Uh-huh.
But it's a little vulgar because I've been listening to you for a long time, and I love what you do. And I don't know if you handle the vulgarity too much, but
yeah, well, there's certain words you can't say on the air, but beyond that,
oh no, I'm never going to say anything. But it's called cognitive dissonance.
Right.
If you give it a listen, they're really funny and intelligent guys, but they're a little on the vulgar side.
Oh, I see. The podcast is right. So, what are was this one of David Icke's Lizard People books?
Yeah, it's called The Biggest Secret. It's a really big book, and it was really mind-numbing for them to read it. I didn't get to read along with them.
Yeah.
But they go really big into like the Illuminati and the lizard people, and
right.
It's really crazy, and it makes me a little scared to think of how many people buy into that.
Yeah.
And it's just frightening to me. I'm only 34, and my son's 13, and he listens to you too.
Oh, great.
And this summer, I wanted him to read one of your books. I don't know which one I should have him read first because I have almost all of them. But I wanted him to read either Screwed or Rebooting the American Dream, and have him just write a little.
Yeah, those are both good books. What Would Jefferson Do is a good one too for somebody who's just getting into American politics.
He loves it, and we love you to death, and I just love it, all you guys and what you do.
Thank you, Tony. So let me get this straight. You do not believe that there are lizard people?
No, but I just find it.
Tony, come on.
It wouldn't surprise me though if Trump took off his little suit.
Yeah, it's like after the Bush administration and the Trump administration, after Dick Cheney and Donald Trump, I'm starting to wonder maybe David Icke is onto something. But yeah, I share your skepticism.
He might be, because my brother's really into that conspiracy stuff, and he calls me and teases me all the time to ruffle my feathers, and we go into long talks, and it's really funny.
Well, about as far as I go with that is my pigeon theory, and I got that from a homeless guy in New York City back years ago. In fact, I think it was the Good Ferry. My friend Jerry was walking me around Greenwich Village, and this man on roller skates with a pink tutu and a tiara and a wand in his hand rolls up to us, and he says, "Hello, Jerry," and Jerry says, "Hello, Good Ferry." They were friends. The Good Ferry was kind of a fixture, and this was in the early 70s in Greenwich Village. And he taps me on the top of his head and blesses me, and then he tells me about the pigeons. They're spies. They're keeping an eye on us. They're from the planet Xenu, and so I've been sharing that story forever.
My wife about that through you, and she was making me a question.
Yeah, well, the Good Fairy said to me, "Have you ever seen a baby pigeon? Have you ever seen a dead pigeon?" And I had to actually stop and say, "No, I don't think so." And he says, "See, proof." Anyhow, Tony, thank you for the call. Great talking with you, and say hi to your son for me. Michael in Westerville, Ohio. Hey, Michael, what's on your mind today?
Hi, good to talk to you.
Hey, Michael, I can't hear you. I don't know if we're on speakerphone or if you're in a bad cell site.
I'm back on.
Okay, what's up?
You talked last week about the problems people have when they have no photo ID.
Correct.
And I just wanted to update you, if you hadn't already had this, about a program that's going on around the states to introduce photo IDs from a city. New York has it, Philadelphia, Detroit, San Francisco, and we're getting to it now here in Columbus. And what this does is it allows homeless people who, let's say, stay in a shelter to use that address as a basis of having a card, which basically says an address, a name, a couple of details, but not necessarily everything. And it serves to get library access, discounts, and it's particularly of use to undocumented people who, when the police stop them, if they don't have ID, they'll take them in. If they're not obliged to turn them over to ICE, they don't even worry. If they have an ID, they just say, okay, yeah, thanks.
So, but this would not help people vote, because if they're giving that to undocumented people, they're not asking proof of citizenship.
Nope, not at all. This is simply to have an identification with a photo that people can use when today, for instance, a woman who doesn't have documentation, if she's attacked, she's not going to say anything to the police. People don't go to the police if they don't have identity. So this really helps that sort of thing. Women who have been victims of domestic violence often leave the home without any kind of ID, and this allows them to establish an identity, get a bank account, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it's a really valuable tool that's coming into being around the country, and we have the head of the city council in New York here in Columbus this next Tuesday to tell our city council about their what they've got out of it. One last thing, just let me mention this if I could. They estimated in New York that about 80,000 people needed it, but they offered so many benefits to it that now there are 800,000 people with a city ID, and it removes any stigma from having a photo ID that's a city ID.
Yeah. The only problem is that in those 30-some-odd red states where Republicans have succeeded in passing voter suppression ID laws, you can't use that to vote.
No, that's right, but it's not a question of citizenship. It's just
I understand. I understand, and I think it's a great thing. It's just I would love to see homeless people able to vote. You know,
of course.
It's just
so would I, but step by step, I guess.
Yeah. Excellent story, Michael. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us. Kevin in Santa Fe Springs, California. Hey, Kevin, what's up? We got 90 seconds here.
This is
minute and a half.
New Mexico, and I was wondering, do lizard people eat pigeons? Are they mortal enemies?
Oh, you're in Santa Fe Springs, New Mexico.
I don't understand some people's outrage with Jeff Sessions. It's kind of like a Casablanca moment. I'm shocked, simply shocked. Jeff Sessions would lie. It's like, really? We've been telling you this all along, and it's like, if we have so much trouble convincing them that he's lying now, it's no wonder we can't convince them that they committed complete election fraud through interstate cross-check with Chris Kovac, and he's as in on it as the rest of them.
Yeah, and now we find that, after 2 years of lock her up chants over Hillary Clinton using a private email server, that Mike Pence was doing this, and his private email server, AOL, he got hacked, and he was doing government business. That Scott Pruitt was doing government business on a private email account, and we don't know if he got hacked or not, but he lied about it before the Senate for his confirmation hearing to head the EPA. And, nobody wants to hold these guys to account. Nobody's chanting lock him up about Mike Pence or Scott Pruitt. But they're still, talking. Actually, some of the Jason Chaffetz is still talking about holding hearings in the House of Representatives looking into Hillary Clinton's use of an email server. It's bizarre.
More of our tax dollars being used for their partisan politics, which is just they're the party of ad hominem.
There you go. Or they're lizard people. You just never know. Kevin, and you do, and Kevin, thank you for that. That's a deep existential question. Do lizard people eat robotic pigeons? I would have to say I don't know the answer to that. We'll be back. It's Anything Goes Friday.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com. Welcome to the Thom Hartmann Book Club. Today we're reading from Hannah Arendt's book, The Origins of Totalitarianism. And I've, known about this book, read little pieces of it for decades. I mean, it's the classic work on totalitarianism. It's long and there's a lot of words in it, but for this moment, Elliot Lustig was tweeting recently about Donald Trump. This is back when Donald Trump was talking about 3 to 5 million illegal immigrants voting, right? And he said, Hannah Arendt, in her book, The Origin of Totalitarianism, provides a helpful guide for interpreting the language of fascists. She noted how decent liberals of 1930s Germany would fact-check the Nazis' bizarre claims about things like Jews as if they were meant to be factual. What they failed to understand, Arendt suggests, is that the Nazi Jew-hating was not a statement of fact, but a declaration of intent. So when someone would blame the Jews for Germany's defeat in World War I, naive people would counter by saying, there's no evidence of that. What the Nazis were doing was not describing what was true, but what would have to be true in order to justify what they planned to do next. So did 3 million illegals cast vote in the election? Clearly not, but fact-checking is just a way of playing along with their game. What Trump is saying is not that 3 million illegals voted. What he's saying is, I'm going to steal the voting rights of millions of Americans. So that's kind of a contemporary frame for this book. So let's read from the book itself. Here, this is from page 348. And she's talking about totalitarian movements and how they use propaganda, how they communicate with the public, and the difference between terror and propaganda, the kind of terror that they can inculcate by just kind of randomly arresting people. Pretty much everybody's committed some kind of crime at some point, right? Arresting people, and on the one hand, that's the terror, or convincing the people. She says totalitarian movements use socialism and racism by emptying them of their utilitarian content, the interests of a class or a nation. The form of infallible protection in which these concepts were presented has become more important than their content. The chief qualification of a mass leader has become unending infallibility. He can never admit an error. The assumption of infallibility, moreover, is based not so much on superior intelligence as on the correct interpretation of the essentially reliable forces in history and nature, forces which neither defeat nor ruin and prove wrong because they're bound to assert themselves in the long run. Mass leaders in power have one concern which overrides all utilitarian consideration: to make their predictions come true. The Nazis did not hesitate to use, at the end of the war, the concentrated force of their still intact organization to bring about as complete a destruction of Germany as possible, in order to make true their prediction that the German people would be ruined in case of defeat. The propaganda effect of infallibility, the striking success of posing as a mere interpreting agent of predictable forces, has encouraged in totalitarian dictators the habit of announcing their political intentions in the form of prophecy. The most famous example is Hitler's announcement to the German Reichstag in January 1939, quote, I want today once again to make a prophecy. In case the Jewish financiers succeed one more in hurling the people into a world war, the result will be the annihilation of the Jewish race in Europe, end of quote. Translated into non-totalitarian language, this means, I intend to make war and I intend to kill the Jews of Europe. Similarly, Stalin, in the great speech before the Central Committee of the Communist Party in 1930, in which he prepared the physical liquidation of intra-party right and left deviationists,
described them as representatives of dying classes. This definition not only gave the argument its specific sharpness, but also announced in totalitarian style the physical destruction of those whose dying out had just been prophesied. In both instances, the same objective is accomplished. The liquidation is fitted into a historical process in which man not only suffers, or does or suffers what, according to some immutable law, is bound to happen anyway. As soon as the execution of the victims has been carried out, the prophecy becomes a retrospective alibi. Nothing happened but what has already been predicted. It does not matter whether the laws of history spell the doom of the classes and their representatives, or whether the laws of nature exterminate all those elements, democracies, Jews, Eastern subhumans, the Untermenschen, or the incurably sick. They are not fit to live anyway. Incidentally, Hitler, too, spoke of dying classes that ought to be, quote, eliminated without much ado, end quote. This method, like other totalitarian propaganda methods, is foolproof only after the movements have seized power. Then all debate about the truth or falsity of a totalitarian dictator's prediction is as weird as arguing with a potential murderer about whether his future victim is dead or alive, since by killing the person in question, the murderer can provide prompt proof of the correctness of his statement. The only valid argument under such conditions is promptly to rescue the person whose death has been predicted. Before mass leaders seize the power to fit reality to their lies, their propaganda is marked by its extreme contempt for facts as such, for, in their opinion, fact depends entirely on the power of the man who can fabricate it. The assertion that the Moscow subway is the only one in the world is a lie only so long as the Bolsheviks have not the power to destroy all the others. In other words, the method of infallible prediction, more than any other totalitarian propaganda device, works. In the book, Hannah Arendt, The Origins of Totalitarianism. And informed
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. The price of Bitcoin has risen to equal that of the price of gold, which is a pretty amazing story. My papers are flying all over the place here. This is at the top of the news mine that I get with my Financial Times subscription. Every week they have this summary of the news. Reduced lending by U.S. banks. Inflation, core inflation in Japan is up 0.1% for the month. That's a little over 1% for the year if it continues. Household debts in China equal 45% of GDP. That's double the 2009 levels. Bankruptcy cases surged in China last year, indicating growing economic stress as well as progress in the ruling Communist Party's efforts to use the country's courts to deal with indebted zombie companies and reduce industrial overcapacity. That's interesting. So they're not viewing that so much as a disaster. And then with regard to wages, our average hourly wages. This is what you're competing against if you want to be an American manufacturing worker. Average hourly wages in China's manufacturing sector tripled between 2005 and 2016. They are now $3.60 an hour, according to Euromonitor. While during the same period, manufacturing wages fell from $2.90 an hour to $2.70 an hour in Brazil, from $2.20 to $2.10 an hour in Mexico, and from $4.30 to $3.60 in South Africa. It looks like all around the world, the economy is just trembling on the edge. This is what Alan Greenspan referred to as froth, as irrational exuberance. And what's going to happen with this? Well, we'll see. We will see. And finally, in Texas, the state has, anti-marijuana laws. And, Houston is a fairly Republican town. There's, some good progressives, some good liberals in Houston, but, it's Texas. And Day before yesterday, Harris County, the city, where Houston is, took an historic step toward freedom and common sense, according to Justin Gardner over at the Free Thought Project. The district attorney for Houston, Kim Ogg, is rolling out the misdemeanor marijuana diversion program. It effectively decriminalizes possession of less than 4 ounces of pot. If you're caught with 4 ounces or less of pot in Houston, the police will basically write you a ticket, and if you agree to a 4-hour, $150 drug education class, all is forgiven. Right? You don't have to, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to go anywhere. It's just, all is forgiven. No criminal record at all. And in fact, this is what Attorney General Kim Ogg said. She said, "We have spent in excess of $250 million, over $250 million, prosecuting a crime that has produced no tangible evidence of improved public safety. We have disqualified unnecessarily thousands of people from greater job, housing, and educational opportunities by giving them a criminal record for what is, in effect, a minor law violation." Harris County spends $26 million a year prosecuting about 10,000 misdemeanor marijuana cases every year. $1.7 million for evidence testing, $13 million spent housing marijuana offenders. Well, that's the point. It's a multi-million-dollar business. But apparently Houston does not have, maybe they do have private prisons that are lobbying against this and private drug testing companies, but if so, it looks like, they don't hold sway. Anyhow, it's Anything Goes Friday. Catherine in Santa Cruz, California. Hey, Catherine, what's on your mind today?
Hi, thank you, Tom. I'm a first-time caller. I've been listening to you for years, wherever and whenever I can.
Well, thank you, Catherine.
I told your screener I'm very nervous, but my motto is speak up even if your voice shakes.
There you go. So what's on your mind?
The new Secretary of Transportation, Elaine Chao, has just withheld $647 million from California's passenger railways projects.
Right, effectively killing two major high-speed rail mass transit programs in California.
Apparently because 14 state senators wrote to the Trump administration or to her opposing it, even though California voted in a ballot initiative to have a high-speed rail from northern to southern California. We want this very much. California has funds, but the federal funds, which apparently were part of the program to boost the economy, have been stopped. So it's essentially stopped for the time being. And I saw Edward Whitkind on your show, and so that encouraged me to call you. I tried to call Elaine Chao's office. I have an old United States government manual from 2002, so I have the phone number of the Department of Transportation. And the person who answered the phone said that her office is not taking any phone calls regarding the California Railways project, and that I should email Elaine Chao. And she gave me an email address for Elaine Chao personally, and I double-checked that I had it right, and I emailed Elaine Chao, and it was bounced back, undelivered, user unknown, or address unknown, or something like that. And so I called again, and she insisted that was the right email. A friend of mine emailed her and had the exact same experience, and she also called and tried to double-check. So I don't know. They don't want us to contact them in any way.
Well, here's what you're doing wrong, Catherine. You're talking to a Republican. Elaine Chao is the wife of Mitch McConnell.
Yes, I know. I know that, and I was just starting with her.
And so when you're talking...
I'm going to go on with other people, our elected officials.
Yeah, I get that. But when you're talking to a Republican, you have to start out by saying, I'm one of the people who donated at least $250,000 to your campaign. And, or I'm a CEO of a major corporation. You've got to establish that you're worth listening to. If you just say, I'm a voter, Republicans don't care about that.
I didn't say anything, but,
well,
I don't want to lie. I don't like it when people call.
Well, I'm being facetious, Catherine. I'm not suggesting that you lie. Okay. My point is that Elaine Chao doesn't want to hear from you. She doesn't want to hear from any of us. And neither does her husband, Mitch McConnell, frankly. In fact, he's hiding out. He's not doing town halls.
How they operate, partly thanks to you, of course.
Well, thank you.
But this is really serious because I grew up in the 1940s and 50s in Southern California, and I watched the destruction of the railway systems, streetcars, and then...
Catherine, I'm sorry, we're out of time, but you need to find out who those 14 Republican state senators are in California, track them down, and then come back and tell us about that.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And contact them. I mean, if I had their names, I would go off on it on the air. If you can get that information to me, I'd love it. Catherine, thank you for the call. We'll be back. And welcome back. Melissa in Madison, Wisconsin. Hey, Melissa. What's on your mind today?
Well, sorry, I'm also nervous.
Okay.
I wanted to throw an idea out there. Now, you said that Trump has already applied for 2020, to run in 2020.
Yes.
And I was wondering if you remember Scott Walker's John Doe investigation, where 5 of his campaign staff got
busted.
Prosecuted. Yeah. Got judgments against him or whatever. What do you think about the? Is this another idea to impeach him? Because he's constantly campaigning. All of his press conferences are just they're press campaign.
Yeah, no, he's in full campaign mode, Melissa. He absolutely is. Barack Obama filed his re-election campaign in the 3rd year, as I recall, of his presidency. Historically, when people file to run for political office, they do it, within the year before they're gonna actually start campaigning. Donald Trump, to the best of my knowledge, is the first president to file for re-election the day that he was sworn in, and which is mind-boggling. But what it does is it gives him access to a large pool of unregulated money, and it gives him the ability to do a lot of things and put them on that tab that he might not otherwise be able to do as president, because he would run afoul of the rules against using public property for political purposes. And so I don't think this is going to present him with the same problem that Scott Walker had. Scott Walker's problems are much deeper, much more systemic, and have to do with, deeply ingrained political corruption in Wisconsin that has followed Scott Walker apparently, since his days in college. And not to say that the Trump administration is not corrupt, but I think that most of their corruption is far more apparent, right? I mean, it's just obvious what they're up to. So, Melissa,
All right, I thought I'd just float that idea.
Well, it's an idea. It's and we need to grasp at all the straws we can. Melissa, thank you for the call. Is there some, before I let you go, Melissa, you live in Wisconsin, was there something about Scott Walker's campaign or candidacy that I'm missing? I mean, was there something that he was doing specifically that is being imitated by the Trump people?
Just as far as I know, people campaigning out of his office. Also, if you want to Google the name Kathy Nicholas, one of the things that she did, like the night after or the day after the election, there was an entire city that apparently she was storing the votes on her laptop, and she was like, oops, I forgot this entire city of, I think it was like 17,000 people or something. Just election fraud.
Wow. Melissa, this is the kind of stuff John Nichols is all over because he lives there. He lives in Madison, as you do. Melissa, thanks for the information. Thanks for the call. It's great to hear from you. I appreciate it. And we'll be right back. It's 20 minutes. Well, it's coming up on actually about 18, 19 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls.
This year's election results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions.
But there is good news.
There is good news.
There is good news. Thousands of people are stepping forward in solidarity, resistance,
and resolve.
We join them.
We join them.
We join them
in standing with the most vulnerable communities among us.
Those most likely to be targeted by new restrictions and policies.
We will tell their stories here.
Here
on Free Speech TV.
We will lift their voices here.
Here on Free Speech TV.
In the difficult times ahead, know that we will be with you 24 hours a day.
Every day.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
There are millions of us.
Raising our voices and hearts together as one.
We've got your back.
We got your back.
Free Speech TV's got your back.
The revolution is in progress.
Welcome back. It's Anything Goes Friday, and David in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Hey, David, what's on your mind?
Yeah, hey, David. Tom, I wanted to comment about the election of Tom Perez as DNC chair.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a lifelong Democrat. I was a Bernie supporter. I ended up voting for Hillary. I sucked it up and did the right thing. And the election of him over Ellison is what I see is completely tone deafness and a disrespect for the liberal wing. I hate to say progressive because it's liberal, but people are ashamed to say they're liberals. Anyway, it gives me the feeling that not only are they missing the fact that, this is all predictable. We knew that if Hillary was the candidate that Trump could very well win. He did. And now everybody's trying to make excuses. But then they're going to now alienate the people like myself, because if they plan on nominating another Hillary Clinton, say her or somebody like her in 4 years, I promise you I will not vote Democrat. I will probably vote for Trump just to put them out of their misery. I mean, I cannot stand the way they can't seem to learn. And then you got Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who's still being handled as if she's a respectable representative of the DNC. I see people interview her as though she represents the Democratic Party. Nothing's changed.
Yeah, yes and no. I get where you're coming from, and I don't disagree with much of your analysis. If the Democratic Party wants to bring along the progressives that, particularly the millennial progressives, who are awakened by Bernie's candidacy, and awakened by Occupy, and awakened by a lot of things before that too, but politically electrified by Bernie Sanders, then they're going to have to, at the very least, start embracing those positions and moving in the direction of basically. I'm reluctant to say move in the direction of Bernie, because I don't think this is about Bernie.
When is that going to happen?
Bernie. Well, let me finish my thought here, David. They're gonna have to move in the direction of FDR. They're going to have to move in the direction of LBJ without the Vietnam War. Of the Great Society. And frankly, I think that they're starting to do that. I mean, Tom Perez beat Keith Ellison by fewer than 30 votes. That is amazing. I mean, I'm telling you, 2 years ago, if somebody had said, that the progressive uprising in the Democratic Party, the House Progressive Caucus never got any press, never gets any mention. The press is in love with Harold Ford Jr. and the Third Way and the whole DLC thing instead. The corporate Democratic, the corporate wing of the Democratic Party, as it were. If somebody were to have said 2 years ago, you're going to have, Keith Ellison, who is, arguably one of the most progressive members of.
Same thing about Bernie. I mean, what is it going to take for that to happen? I mean, we're going to always be the, it was so close every year for the next decade. So close.
The Clinton wing of the party has owned the party basically for 2 decades. And, they are, number one, they are changing. They're getting it those positions, those neoliberal positions, is a great experiment, good try, but it didn't work. It's not working. And so, but they want to remain relevant. They want to stay in the party. So they're starting to embrace those positions. And David, I really think it's just I'm absolutely an optimist because I'm watching what's happening. I'm seeing a party waking up. I'm seeing a party in the last election. You had 6 members who picked up House seats. We picked up 6 House seats. All of them were progressives. We picked up, a couple of senators. Peters out of Michigan, I'm not sure if it was the last election or the one before, but just, ran as just a pure progressive run. What you're finding is that this conventional wisdom that you've got to have Democrats who imitate Republicans, the kind of Joe Manchin Democrats, in order to carry states like West Virginia, that was shattered. That thinking was shattered when Bernie won West Virginia by 20 points. So
but a lot of them are saying the Russians cost us the election. They're still, they're missing the point if they keep making these excuses, because that did not sway it enough. It was all about, who they nominated. And if they keep making blaming the FBI, Comey's report, and disenfranchisement, all those things played a role. But it shouldn't even have been a close election for that to happen. So, I mean, if they're going to keep looking at that and saying, oh, she should have won, it was all these unfair things, then we're
but the reality is, David, Hillary Clinton is not Bill Clinton. She has always been considerably more progressive than him. She ran on a far more progressive platform, and she embraced that platform. She had moved to the point where Bernie Sanders endorsed her. She was holding 90% of his positions, and the ones she wasn't holding, she was damn close to. The press did a really crappy job of pointing that out. Her own campaign did a really pathetic job of pointing that out. It was a very poorly run campaign. But, I think that Hillary Clinton, I actually, was getting enthusiastic about her candidacy. I thought, she's moving in the right direction. I think the entire party is moving in the right direction. And, David, when people sit around on the outside and just say, screw this, I'm going to vote for Donald Trump just to stick it to them. What you're doing is empowering the dinosaurs in the party who are saying, see, I told you, these young people, you can't rely on them. They don't have a commitment to the party. They're not going to do the hard work of party building. They're not going to, and it sounds so entitled, David. It sounds, it's not easy.
Say that.
I beg your pardon?
I say they're always going to say that. They're always going to attack the people who are not with the establishment, And
no, what I'm saying, David, what I'm saying is, instead of complaining about it, do something about it.
Agreed. Yes, I agree with that. But it's not going to be easy. So I guess that's
no, it's not going to be easy. But it's happening all over the country. I mean, you're getting, ourrevolution.com, and which is more of the Bernie faction, and then you've got indivisibleguide.com. Those people are, I believe that they're supported by Hillary's super PAC, and they're between the two of them, they're turning out huge crowds all over the country for an actual progressive revolution. I think that's a good thing. And it's happening
the Democratic Party though.
It's happening within the Democratic Party. I'm seeing this party become, go back to its FDR roots. And I'm you listen to the program long enough, it's like almost at least I'd say once a week somebody calls in and says, I got active, I ran for political office, I'm running for Congress, I'm running for dog catcher, I'm running for city council, or I just became my precinct committee person in the Democratic Party. It's, in my opinion, a very positive motion. Like I said, the changes that we've seen just in the last 2 years in the Democratic Party, I don't think anybody could have predicted 2 years ago. And we have to give Bernie credit where credit's due, because he woke up a lot of people and brought a lot of energy into it. And it's just, the party has a choice now. It can take that energy and run with it, and that's Perez's big challenge, or not, which would be a disaster. David, thanks.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
The last thing we need to be doing is creating the circular firing squad and saying, oh, yeah, I'm going to go off and vote for Trump. No, we need to get inside the Democratic Party and make it work for all of us. Paul Krugman says that, yes, the white working class is about to be betrayed. The evidence of that coming betrayal is obvious in the choice of an array of pro-corporate, anti-labor figures for particular positions, key positions. In particular, the most important story of the week, seriously, people, stop focusing on Trump's Twitter, was the selection of Tom Price, an ardent opponent of Obamacare and advocate of Medicare privatization, as Secretary of HHS, Health and Human Services. This choice probably means that the Affordable Care Act is doomed, and Mr. Trump's most enthusiastic supporters will be among the biggest losers. Yes. And then he says, the first thing you need to understand here is that Republican talk of repeal and replace has always been a fraud. The GOP has had 6 years claiming it'll come up with a replacement for Obamacare any day now. The reason why it hasn't delivered is because it can't. Now, let me add to this. The reason why the Republicans have not been able to offer an alternative to Obamacare is because Obamacare was the original Republican plan. This is what Richard Nixon proposed in 1972, back when we had real news in the United States. And Teddy Kennedy fought. And then the Heritage Foundation in the early 1980s, at the beginning of the Reagan administration, I believe it was, came out with a working paper on this and said, here's how to do it. Mitt Romney tried it in Massachusetts, and it was relatively successful. He tried it in 2000. He ran for president on it in 2004, or he intended to. By that time, though, Obamacare had passed and it had become radioactive, and so he was trying to, oh no, I didn't do that, you know, but he did. I mean, it was that's the Republican program. The Democratic program is Medicare. Give Medicare to everybody. But the Democratic program couldn't get through, given the current Congress we had. So this is what President Obama put together, was basically the Republican program. Speaking of when we actually had news in this country, have you heard anybody breaking down any of these pieces of legislation lately? Back in 1972, when Richard Nixon proposed Obamacare, Daniel Schorr went on CBS News. Daniel Schorr has since passed away. Lamar and I had a wonderful lunch with him here in Washington, D.C. back, 20 years ago. When we were writing our first book on the JFK assassination, Daniel Schorr had some fascinating information for us. What an amazing guy and a great journalist. But this is how journalism used to be done in the United States. This is a clip from CBS back from the day. You can find this floating around YouTube. Here it is.
The administration proposal would provide different plans for 4 categories of Americans. For 150 million working people and their families, employers would be required to buy health insurance providing a basic package of benefits, eventually they paying 3/4 of the premiums.
This is number
For some
one.
20 million of the working poor and their families, the current free Medicaid services would be replaced by private health insurance fully paid by the government for the poorest, with a sliding scale of contributions for families earning more than $3,000.
That's number 2, the second part of it.
For the 21 million aging Americans, the $5.60 monthly Medicare premium for optional doctor services would be dropped. Social Security taxes adjusted to make up the cost.
That's part 3.
For some 30 million domestic, self-employed, and others, lower costs by being enabled to buy policies at group rates from insurance pools.
Sound like Obamacare?
Deductions, co-insurance features. The plan is estimated to cover less than half of the average patient's health expenses and to cost the federal government less than $2 billion in addition to what it's now paying. By contrast, the Kennedy plan would cover an estimated 70% of health expenses through a system that would cost the government up to $60 billion, but including a lot of what patients are now paying. The Kennedy bill is straight national health insurance, financed by Social Security
the Kennedy
and
bill
general
was single-payer
taxes,
health insurance.
with no cost sharing, no cutoff point for the beneficiaries, bypassing private insurance companies, operating through a presidentially appointed health security board. And so the line is being drawn between repairs on the present health system and a new federal health system. The debate starts next Monday, when Welfare Secretary Richardson is scheduled to appear at the opening of hearings of the Senate Health Subcommittee. The chairman of that subcommittee now, Senator Kennedy.
There you go. And then he goes to Kennedy and he gives a speech. And there's another one out there too where Walter Cronkite is breaking the thing down. I mean, there's a couple of them where they're breaking it down because that's what news used to do. And then in the 80s, during the Reagan administration, keep in mind this was 72, and then in the 1980s during the Reagan administration, whenever any news media came out and said, hey, Ronald Reagan just lied to you. You know, these are not facts. Things like that, then you had this whole media infrastructure that was funded by these very, very wealthy families, by the Coors family and by the Bradley Foundation, the Bradley family. And a lot of them now, they're just foundations because the founders are dead, but they were live, live and kicking back then. And they were funding groups like, Brent Bozell's group, which I think was ACT, something like that, Accuracy in Media, AIM, AIM. And they would just yell and scream, oh, my God, Daniel Shore, he's CEO, how dare he, blah, blah, blah. And this was a strategy that was called working the refs. You work the referees. You hassle the referees to the point where they just finally give in and say, all right already. And that's what our media did, is they said, all right already. We're tired of fighting with you right-wingers about what's factual and what's not. We'll just stop talking about facts. Hey, want to hear that clip again? Subscribe to the Thom Hartmann Program on YouTube to see all your favorite show highlights. All the important stories we cover and the issues we care about are at HartmannReport.com. Members of our community can comment and join the conversation. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Fred in South Hadley, Mass. Hey, Fred, what's on your mind today?
Well, my senator, Ed Markey, recently, as I understand it, submitted a bill requiring that a nuclear first strike would have to have a congressional declaration of war.
Yes.
And apparently our system does not have that now.
That's correct.
And I signed a petition in support of that bill and all that. But I haven't seen or heard anything about it. And I'm wondering if you know anything about its progress or...
To the best of my knowledge, the Republicans are just completely ignoring it. Basically, Democrats don't have the ability to bring anything forward legislatively in a meaningful way. And so, you know, they can propose legislation all day long, but, you know, they propose it in the Senate and Mitch McConnell will laugh at it. And they propose it in the House and Paul Ryan will simply refuse to even bring it to the floor for a vote.
So it's basically a symbolic gesture, I guess.
Well, you know, often symbolic gestures are important things. It starts a conversation. It starts a meme going. And, you know, Ed Markey's a really good guy, and he's a good senator. And I think that it's a great thing that he did this, and I'd like to see it pushed, and I'd like to see it get more publicity. But the reality is that the Republicans are not going to do anything to constrain Donald Trump. And as unfortunate as that reality is, this is the guy who said, you know, we've got all these nuclear weapons. Why aren't we using them? And it's like, what? You know, well, yeah, we did, actually. You know, we did use them, and it was pretty awful. You know, we used them in Japan, and we used them on the Bikini, you know, Atoll, and we used them on our own people, basically, you know, testing them in Utah and Nevada. And, you know, we poisoned a lot of people. And but I'm with you, Fred. I'm with you. Thanks a lot for listening to WHMP. Thanks for the call. Brian in Fort Collins, Colorado. Hey, Brian, what's up? You want to talk about Mike Pence?
I do, Tom, and the screener admonished me to get straight to my point. Listening to you,
good on Nate.
There's so many things that I would like to talk about, but let me go. Let me quickly give you like a little bit of lighthearted thing that you could put on a T-shirt, which would say, "I'm not anti-American. I'm anti-stupid." So
okay.
Anyway, Tom. To my main point, and this is founded on the idea that Americans are so desperate to believe that, you know, we are exceptional, that our leaders are exceptional, and now you're seeing it play out with Trump. You know, he gives a speech, and so they want to think, everybody wants to think he's normal. They're so desperate to believe that. So to my point about Mike Pence, he is in this, he wants us to believe that he has been in this bubble, totally oblivious to, you know, the multitudinous contacts with the Russians, and the only, you know, he's outraged that Flynn lied to him. This is, you know, I go back to the title of the movie, All the President's Men. All the president's men are involved in this Russian thing, even if it's only, you know, as willful ignorance or plausible deniability, Tom. And, you know, somehow we have to find a way out of this because, you know, Pence, at the very least, was appointed by Donald Trump, who is a maniac, and so are all his cabinet members. So. I don't know if we can go extra constitutional or what, but this is, you know, putting up with 4 years of this is just unacceptable. What do you think?
I think that it's a big mistake. I think that if the Democratic Party is going to put all its bets on Russia bashing, that's something that, I mean, you can scare Americans. We did that with Saddam Hussein. We ended up with an awful war. If you want to do Russia bashing, we could end up with a far more awful war. Russia is they've got 8,000 nuclear weapons. I have seen no, the evidence here is so far non-existent. When, some evidence comes out that Russia was doing nasty stuff during the election, then let's raise hell. But there is no evidence at this moment, and this is the point that the guy who I'm forgetting his name, but the publisher, the editor of the New Yorker, he's got his entire issue is devoted to that this week. And day before yesterday, or maybe the day before that, he was on Rachel Maddow's show on MSNBC, and he basically said, yeah, the Russians hated Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton, and there's a very clear reason why. When the Soviet Union was dissolving during the presidency of George Herbert Walker Bush and the tail end of Reagan's, Gorbachev made a deal with both Reagan and Bush Sr. that he would dissolve the Soviet Union and let these countries go, let Poland and Latvia and Lithuania and Estonia and Ukraine, and just let them go in exchange for an assurance from the United States that NATO would not be established in any of these countries that were contiguous with the Russian border. Much like we said back in 1963 to Russia, you may not put your nuclear weapons in Cuba, which is 90 miles off our shore. So that was the deal. And Bill Clinton broke that deal. And that has been a thorn in the side of the Russians ever since. And so, I agree with his consensus that, to the extent that Russians might have been, or the Russian government for that matter, might have been trying to, take a nick out of Hillary Clinton, that it was for that reason. They didn't see her as a person that would work with them, given what her husband had done, and given her own rhetoric. And whether that's a true interpretation or not, I believe that is their interpretation. And that's really weak stuff to take down the Republican Party with. I think that the Democrats are making a huge mistake by not pointing out that the Republicans, and this should be hammered. I mean, if the Democrats had done anything close to this outrageous, the Republicans would be hammering on it. That the first thing that Donald Trump did was make it harder for average working people to buy a home by increasing the profits of banksters. The second thing he did was make it easier for coal companies to poison tens of millions of people downstream from coal mines by allowing coal mines to, mountaintop coal mine removal, to dump their crap, to dump their waste, their poison, their mercury-laden, chromium-laden, lead-laden, radioactive-laden waste into our streams. He blew up the U.S. Streams rule. That he's stacked his cabinet with he's got, 4 Goldman Sachs people in his cabinet and 3 other Goldman Sachs people as close advisors, including Steve Bannon. He's got, the guy who used to run Goldman Sachs as his chief economic advisor. He's running us down the road toward oligarchy and kleptocracy. And nobody's talking about these things. And these are the things that actually win elections. Americans don't, it's not going to motivate Americans to go to the polls thinking that Donald Trump might, be favorable to Putin or Russia. That's not going to get people out of their houses and down to the polls, one way or the other, frankly. But knowing that Trump and the Republicans are going to take away your health insurance, knowing that they want to take away your Social Security, knowing that they want to poison your children and you, all in the name of profits to the industries that own them, that's the stuff that wins elections. And it concerns me, frankly, and I find myself in a somewhat difficult position saying this, but I just, it really concerns me that the Democratic Party is putting all their chips on this one, on this one, 28 on the roulette wheel, of Russia, when they really should be distributing their chips on, he's destroying working people, he's destroying our air, he's destroying our water, he wants to give away Western lands to the drillers and the polluters. He wants to. I mean, there's so many things that Trump has already done that are outrageous, and they're getting no coverage at all because this Russia thing is just consuming everything. And until there's some evidence, I don't think that this is going to be a solid story. So anyhow, that's my take on it, Brian. I'll, along with everybody else, I'll say, okay, these guys should talk about, who they talked to and what they said. And it looks like Jeff Sessions lied, before the Senate, and that's a terrible thing. And Bill Clinton lied about having sex, and he got impeached for it. That, Jeff Sessions should lose his job over it if we're holding to Republican standards. I'm totally down with all of that stuff. But we need to broaden this beyond just, outrage about a foreign government. That is not the kind of stuff that wins or loses elections, frankly. Until or unless you can prove that Donald Trump and Mike Pence and these guys are actual traitors. And I just don't believe there's any evidence of that. Brian, thank you for the call. We'll be back. It's coming up on 15 minutes before the hour. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be back with more of your calls on Anything Goes Friday. We're going to check in with Talk Media News, too, in about 4 minutes or thereabouts. Stick around. And welcome back. Rich in Greenwood, Indiana. You wanted to talk about COINTELPRO and the Nazis?
Well, it actually starts with the topic of Hannah Arendt, because in her efforts to shed light on things, she wrote The Banality of Evil, which made my list, and it was actually Banksy, the street artist, who brought that topic forward for me, because he did a painting that was on an HBO special as like these 30 different things he did in New York City. I hope people can find that. It was very neat. But Hannah Arendt had a counterintelligence program file, which I found out about in Betty Metzger's book, The Burglary, which was about the 1971 discovery of COINTELPRO.
Right.
And
she also, by the way, wrote The Origins of Totalitarianism.
COINTELPRO was the glimpse of the deep state. And, when did that begin? Can't say. OSS, as precursor to CIA, was in its transition as FBI existed, but OSS was as Allied forces were marching towards Berlin from the west, and Russian forces were marching towards us from the east. We clunked together, and we get Checkpoint Charlie. And what we're dealing with here is this ground being taken, and I knew about Operation Paperclip hoovering up the rocket scientists, these guys that had been the missile program making...
Right, this is where we got Werner von Braun.
Precisely, yes. So we're populating our Aeronautical and Space Administration with these...
the old Nazis.
Yeah, the human resources of the Reich. But what did we do with the SS guys?
Oh, they became the CIA.
Somebody got them.
No, there's
a movie from, I think it's just last year, The Man from UNCLE, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., which is based on the old TV show from the 60s.
Right.
And Uncle Rudy in the film is this Nazi torturer. And, he's this former SS guy.
Yeah.
And there's this little scene that had me ask the question for the very first time, what was OSS doing as they bumped into these guys from the Third Reich's secret police?
Right. What the OSS was doing was recruiting them. There have been several books written about, the history of the modern CIA. And as the OSS transitioned into the CIA in the late 40s, maybe it was the early 50s, I forget which, I think it was late. I think it was 46, 47, 48. They were actively recruiting Nazi spies and bringing them into the CIA, and which is not to say that the CIA became Nazis, but there were some questionable folks being brought in. And I'm sorry I can't tell you the title of the book where I read this stuff, but it's been 20, 30 years. But it should be fairly easy to Google. Rich, thanks for the call. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Tim in Sioux City, Iowa. Hey, Tim, what's on your mind today?
Hold on, Tom.
Sure.
Hey, Tom, how are you?
Good. So what's up, Tim?
Good.
What's happening in Iowa?
You know, I ran last year. I called you and told you I was going to because I was your Tag Your Rick guy, and I made it.
You ran for public office and won?
Yes, I did. First time ever.
Cool. What are you now?
I'm Representative Tim Casina, District 14, State of Iowa.
Good on you, Tim. Congratulations.
Well, it was all you guys doing it, saying Tag Your Rick, get out there, just like you were telling your earlier caller.
Well, thank you.
Sad thing is that Alec has taken over Iowa. I think you can put us right with Georgia, Mississippi, the rest of them, Wisconsin. We already gutted collective bargaining this year.
Right.
Underfunding schools. Got one of the worst workman comp bills coming up again this week. But they got all three houses.
Yeah, so the Republicans control both your House and Senate there in the state of Iowa?
And governor.
And a governor. Oh, man. Well,
Tim Branstad. Tim could have been soon enough to go to China.
Yeah, there you go. I've got to move along because we've got Talk Media News on the line with us. But Tim, good on you for running for political office. Good on you for winning. And give us a call from time to time. Give us a report on what's going on in Iowa, like you just did. Keep us up to date, okay?
I will, buddy. Thanks.
Okay, thanks a lot. Great to hear from you. And boy, that is marvelous. People actually, running for political office. That's spectacular. Let's see here. Patrick Gavin with Talk Media News. Hey, Patrick, what's on your mind today?
Hey, how are you? We're keeping our eye here on the Jeff Sessions story with Russia. No surprise, I'm sure, to you, and kind of taking a look at exactly what are the options on exactly how this might play out with Capitol Hill in terms of what kind of investigation might be launched. It looks like the most likely thing, at least if Republicans have their way, would sort of be for the investigations to be conducted by the existing committees. That would obviously be what they would prefer. John McCain and Lindsey Graham have proposed a special congressional committee, but that seems pretty unlikely that Congress would ever approve such a move. I would say the same thing about Nancy Pelosi's idea about having an independent bipartisan commission. I don't know if there's quite the momentum for that quite yet. I do think one thing that's interesting is sort of if we play this out, I do think there is a big risk, I think, for Sessions if a special counsel takes over this probe. Namely, even if he didn't commit perjury in a very specific sense during his confirmation hearing, Sessions still could be in a bit of legal trouble for not telling his Senate colleagues that he'd met with the Russian ambassador on 2 occasions. Even if it's in the sort of letter of the law, it's certainly not in the spirit of the law, and it is, misleading at best testimony. It probably won't rise to the level of perjury, but failing to provide information to Congress still is a pretty serious charge.
Yeah, it is. We'll see how it plays out. What else is going on, Patrick?
One thing we're also keeping a lookout for is sort of, which to be honest, I think everybody is where is this Republican Obamacare bill? Republicans say, in fact, that this bill is great and that it'll be ready soon and that it will pass this month, but no one has exactly seen it quite yet. And right now, I think what is interesting to see is that, I'm not even quite sure that Republicans are terribly eager to do this. I mean, as annoying as the Sessions story is, it's annoying, I think, for the Trump administration almost exclusively. It's not terribly annoying to House Republicans because they, I think, from their measure, didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
It's more on, but the reality is that Obamacare is going to be on House Republicans, and that's where things are going to get complicated and difficult, and that's going to be a press cycle that they don't want, coupled with what's happening around the country with various town halls and protests around that. So, what we know so far of what the Republican plan might include, just based on some initial reports, is rescinding the expansion of Medicaid eligibility, and essentially saying that people will continue to have financial assistance to people who buy private coverage. But it does seem as if the larger picture of that aid would be shifting away from the poor and the old and toward, I think, the wealthier and the young. And this for Republicans is going to be a very difficult thing for them to defend by those constituents back at home who are not rich and young.
Right. And this is this is my concern about the Democratic Party is, the first thing Trump did when he took office was passed a rule that increased the profits of banks and made it harder for average working people to buy a house. The second thing he did, changing the streams rule, was to add $50 million to the profits of 5 or 6 coal oligarchs in West Virginia, and increase the poison level in the rivers and streams that are feeding drinking water to millions of people by saying you don't have to clean up the waste from mining, you can simply dump it in the rivers now. I mean, it's like going back to 1880. Step by step, if you look at basically everything that has been done by the Trump administration so far, it's stuff that I think most Americans do not agree with. And the Democratic Party should be pounding on this stuff instead of just going hysterical about whether Jeff Sessions lied to the Senate in something that, I am predicting that there will be no there.
Right.
So, we'll see. But I think that the Democrats have so much good stuff to work with. But the thing is that, the media and the Republicans, the media in particular, it's easy, fun to bash a foreign country. But, oh, no, we're not going to bash the coal oligarchs in West Virginia. We're not going to bash the corporations that want, these protections, which is what regulations are, that want these consumer protections and American protections eliminated. They don't want to bash them. So anyhow, back to you, Patrick.
Yeah, and it's interesting, and you bring up a good point, which is there's a bit of a trend, I think, with what we've seen is that there are these sort of side shows. The Sessions story is a big story. That's not a sideshow. But if it ends up that there is no there, then we have this press cycle that focuses on it, perhaps understandably, but then these other issues kind of get...
Right. They should be talking about Scott Pruitt. If they want somebody who lied to Congress, Scott Pruitt lied to Congress about taking letters from Devon Energy and perhaps other companies. I mean, we don't have all the emails, but it looks like Koch Industries was heavily involved with this, too. Taking letters from these companies, copying them onto his official state of Kansas Attorney General letterhead and sending them to the EPA. I mean, he lied to Congress about not having a private email server. Scott, and doing business with official government business, and also communicating with the coal companies and the oil companies on that on a private server on a Gmail account. He lied to Congress about that. That's stuff you go after people over. Not, hey, did you say hi to the Russian ambassador? I mean, yeah, if it turns out that Jeff Sessions met with the Russian ambassador and said, hey, don't worry, everything's going to be great. We're gonna hand you Ukraine as soon as we become president. Don't worry. If that happened, then, all hell is going to break loose. But I can't believe that happened. I mean, it's going to be nothing but that's exactly what Pruitt was doing with the big oil companies. It's what he was doing with the coal companies. Yes, elect us and we will give you millions of dollars in profits, even though it's going to mean people dying downstream, people being poisoned by your products. And that, I think, is outrageous. So anyhow, Patrick, sorry about the rant. Patrick Gavin with Talk Media News. Thanks a lot for the call, Patrick.
Take care.
Good talking. We'll be back. Stick around. It's Anything Goes Friday. We'll be taking your calls right after the news at the top of the hour. Stick
around. You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com. Hi, it's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. We're reading today from Rebooting the American Dream, from the introduction. It's titled Back to the Future. On April 14th, 1789, George Washington was out walking through the fields at Mount Vernon, his home in Virginia, when Charles Thomson, the Secretary of the Continental Congress, rode up on horseback. Thomson had a letter for Washington from the President pro tem of the new constitutionally created United States Senate, telling Washington that he'd just been elected president, and the inauguration was set for April 30th in the nation's capital, New York City. This created two problems for George Washington. The first was saying goodbye to his 82-year-old mother, which the 57-year-old Washington did that night. She gave him her blessing and told him it was the last time he'd see her alive, as she was gravely ill, and indeed she died before he returned from New York. The second problem was finding a suit of clothes made in the United States of America. For that, he sent a courier to his old friend and fellow general from the American Revolutionary War, Henry Knox. Washington couldn't find a suit made in America because in the years prior to the American Revolution, the British East India Company, whose tea was thrown into the Boston harbor by outraged colonists after the Tea Act of 1773 gave the world's largest transnational corporation a giant tax break. But the British East India Tea Company controlled the manufacture and the transportation of a whole range of goods, including fine clothing. Cotton and wool could be grown and sheared in the colonies, but it had to be sent to England to be turned into clothing. This was a routine policy for England, and it's why until India achieved its independence in 1947, Mahatma Gandhi, who was assassinated a year later, sat at his spinning wheel for his lectures and daily spun clothing in his own home. It was, like his Salt March, a protest against the colonial practices of England and an entreaty to his fellow Indians to make their own clothes to gain independence from British companies and institutions, even though making their own clothes or making their own salt was against British law. Fortunately for George Washington, an American clothing company had been established on April 28, 1783 in Hartford, Connecticut, by a man named Daniel Hinsdale. And it produced high-quality woolen and cotton clothing, as well as items made from imported silk. It was to Hinsdale's company that Knox turned, and he helped Washington get, in time for his inauguration 2 weeks later, a nice but not excessively elegant brown American-made suit. He wore British black later for the celebration and the most famous painting, but he was sworn in wearing an American-made suit. When Washington became president in 1789, most of America's personal and industrial products of any significance were manufactured in England or in other British colonies. Washington asked his Treasury Secretary, Alexander Hamilton, what could be done about that, and Hamilton came up with an 11-point plan to foster American manufacturing, which he presented to Congress in 1791. By 1793, most of its points had either been made into law by Congress or formulated into policy by either President Washington or the various states, which put our country on a path of developing its industrial base and generating the largest source of federal revenue for more than 100 years. Those strategic proposals built the greatest industrial powerhouse the world had ever seen. And after more than 200 successful years, Alexander Hamilton's program was only abandoned during the administrations of Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, and Bill Clinton, and remained abandoned to this day. Modern-day China, however, implemented most of Hamilton's plan just in the 1990s and has brought about a remarkable transformation of its nation in a single generation. Hamilton's 11-point plan for American manufacturers is a primary inspiration for this book. It was part of a larger work titled Alexander Hamilton's Report on the Subject of Manufactures, made in his capacity as Secretary of the Treasury. It's the official title. And then I list Hamilton's 11-point plan for American manufacturers. And I'll share just the headlines of this. He starts out by saying, a full view now having been taken to the inducements to the promotion of manufacturers in the United States, in other words, why we should do this, accompanied with an examination of the principal objections, which are commonly urged in opposition. This was Jefferson's objection that he didn't want America to be a manufacturing nation. He wanted us to be an agricultural nation. Hamilton says, it is proper in the next place to consider the means by which it may be effected. So here he says, in order to a better judgment of the means proper to be presented to the United States, it will be of use to advert to those which have been employed with success in other countries. In other words, they're stealing this idea from England. It was called the Tudor Plan when King Henry VII came up with it. So number one, protecting duties, import taxes, now called tariffs, or duties on those foreign articles which are the rivals of domestic ones intended to be encouraged. So number one, raise the cost of imported goods. Number two, prohibition of rival articles or duties equivalent to prohibitions on some things that we think it's really important to make in America. Make the duties, the tariffs, so high that nobody would want to import them, so there'll be a strong domestic manufacturing presence. Three, prohibitions on the exportation of materials of manufacture. Why provide raw materials to other countries, like we're doing right now to China, to make stuff to sell back to us when we can simply make it here, manufacture it here? Number four, pecuniary bounties. This is one of the most efficacious means of encouraging manufacturers, basically, subsidizing growing and new nascent industries. So that's just up to number four. There are 11 points. The rest of it's all in the book, Rebooting the American Dream, and you can find it online. Franz Anton Mesmer and others.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. It's Anything Goes Friday, and let's just dive right into it. Lynn in Houston, Texas. And by the way, somebody on Twitter corrected me. I was going off on Houston being a Republican town this morning. It turns out Houston's a very Democratic town, and I thanked the person on Twitter for correcting me. And Lynn, if you're calling to do the same, I'll preempt that, but you're on the air.
Yeah, that was exactly the same. We voted out every Republican who was up for re-election.
That blows my mind.
Election. And also, just to let you know, Dallas has a Democratic mayor, and so does San Antonio and Austin.
Yeah, I knew about San Antonio and Austin.
Not enough to make up for everybody else in the state.
There you go. There you go. Well, good on you. So was that what you called about, or was there?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
just wanted to get the right numbers out there.
Yeah, there you go. And my apologies for getting it wrong. I should not go off on things like that when I'm only operating on what's the old joke? What happens when you assume it makes an ass of you and me, et cetera. I should not have been.
I forgive you.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend. David in how do you say that town in Hawaii, David?
Kaneohe.
Kaneohe. Great.
Yes.
So what's on your mind?
Well, at the top of the hour, you just had a news report about Trump talking to the troops in Virginia.
I did not hear it. That would have been on your local station, or so. Tell me about it.
Your fellow, anyway.
Oh, it might have been on our stream. I didn't hear it in any case.
On AOL this morning, there's a little story. It's titled "Trump Points to Job Creation as New Reason for Military Buildup." And the quote here, he's quoted as saying, "This great rebuilding effort will create many jobs in Virginia and across America, and will also spur new technology and new innovation."
It's true. It's true. So, you can pour money into the military, and it will
not going to do much good. Well, it's just so crazy.
Well, the point I was making, David, is you can pour money into the military, and it will stimulate the economy, and it will create jobs.
It will. I know, but
the problem is
it's the butter problem.
The problem is that if you spend $1 million on the military, and then you build a fancy bomb, and you take it over and you drop it on Saddam Hussein, your $1 million just went away. Exactly. Right? The vast majority of military spending does not. It creates jobs on a one-off basis. Yes, we built a bomb today. Yes, we built some bullets today. Yes, we built a new fighter jet today. But eventually, that's all going to be destroyed. On the other hand, if you took that same $1 million and put it into a road or a bridge or high-speed, broadband access to people or any other kind of public utility, public investment, then that $1 million is going to come back to you as $5 million or $10 million in added economic activity and, frankly, an added tax revenue that pays back down that investment. And so, we know, like from the GI Bill, for every dollar we spent sending GIs to college for free, in quotes, back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, we got $7 in additional tax revenue back. With the Eisenhower highway system, I mean, some people are estimating that for every dollar we spent, we got $1,000 back. It may be much higher than that, actually, when you look at all the economic activity that interstate highway system created. Same thing with Lincoln with the railway system, from country to country or from coast to coast across the country. So, yeah, defense spending does create jobs. Trump is right on that, but it doesn't create, A, the kind of jobs you want over the long term, and B, it's not self-generative. It doesn't add to things. So, it's like the worst reason to spend money on defense is to create jobs. The best reason is because you need to do it because you've got an enemy someplace. But, we're spending more on our military than the other 7 nations in the, combined. I mean, it's crazy. David, thank you for the call. Cora in Taos, New Mexico. Hey, Cora, what's on your mind today?
Well, for the frustrated people, we need to be looking at our party locally. And here in New Mexico, we've already had our precinct meeting February 18th. Our county meeting is the 18th of this month. And if I could mention 2 candidates specifically running for state office, Tom, these are both progressives, Bernie people. They raised donations, and they went to Standing Rock. And that is Rusty Pierce for the chairman of the Democratic Party here in the state of New Mexico, and also Kathleen Burke is running for vice chair.
Great. Okay,
I think
Cora.
they both have GoFundMe pages, but start locally if you're unhappy.
Amen. Amen. Cora, thanks for the information. Thanks for the call, and hopefully people will respond. You want to just give those names one more time?
Okay, Rusty Pierce is running for the chair of the party here in New Mexico, and Kathleen Burke is running for vice chair.
Great. Okay, Cora, thank you very much. David in Oakland, California. Hey, David, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Happy Friday.
Thanks. Back at you.
I wanted to discuss an idea that I had with you regarding corporate media. So I work in the nonprofit sector. And, of course, there's a huge problem in American media with corporate shareholders kind of deciding what content is put out there. So my idea would be any news content that's regulated by FCC would be forced to register as a 501c3.
I don't think that's a bad idea. The problem is that news content is no longer regulated by the FCC. That was what the Fairness Doctrine did.
I figured, like broadcast channels or, I mean, if you have shareholders, I don't think we're going to get the news that we deserve and that we need.
Yeah.
So,
I agree. There's one proposal out there that is getting absolutely no publicity at all that I think is real interesting. And that is Time Warner right now wants to merge with AT&T and create, this giant behemoth telco company, ISP, and producer of news media. And one of the suggestions has been, okay, if we're going to let them merge, and the Trump administration is almost certainly going to let this happen because, antitrust, we don't need no stinking antitrust is the Republican mantra, then at the very least, require them to spin CNN off, convert it to a nonprofit, and let it run as a standalone company that's committed to telling the news. And that makes a lot of sense to me. Or even do it as a for-profit. But I think you're absolutely right, David, that if with the thing that people fail to understand about the difference between for-profit and not-profit is it doesn't have to do with how much money is left over at the end of the year. Nonprofits have what are called fund balances at the end of the year. They end up with money that for-profit would end up being taxed or being dividends. But the first purpose of a for-profit corporation is to make profit. The second purpose is to make that profit doing whatever they happen to be doing, if they're a news agency or if they're a travel agency or whatever they may be. The first purpose of a not-for-profit is to fulfill the mission of the not-for-profit. So if you have a nonprofit hospital or a school or a community for abused kids or whatever, their first mission is not to show a profit, but to serve their base. So if you have a not-for-profit news organization, and there are some great ones out there, commondreams.org, Alternet, there's some great nonprofit news organizations out there. If you have a not-for-profit news organization, their first commitment is going to be getting the news. And I would love to see CNN flip nonprofit and become, what Ted Turner envisioned and what he actually created. A channel that actually does the news all day long and not the same 4 stories recycled every single hour. David, thanks for the call. We'll be back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Back with more of your calls on Anything Goes Friday right after this. Stick around. And welcome back. Catherine in Burlington, Vermont, watching us on YouTube. Hey, Catherine, what's up?
Hey, Tom, Noble Tom. You mentioned Howard Zinn earlier, that they are trying to ban his book in Arkansas.
Correct.
And in 1982, I thought the Supreme Court set a standard for banning books where it would have to have racism in the book or something like that, where it's inappropriate for children to read.
I am unfamiliar with that. I would guess that if they did something like that, it would be fairly narrowly circumscribed.
What do you mean?
I mean, if the Supreme Court, they wouldn't say borders can ban a book or can't ban a book. They would say a school district can or can't.
No, here you go. However, once a book is in a library, school boards may remove it only under certain circumstances.
Oh, well, that was the ruling?
The legal standard for banning books, the Supreme Court set the standard for banning books in 1982, Island Trees School District versus Pico.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So it was a school library, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, whether Arkansas or which state was it? Alabama? Arkansas, yeah. Whether Arkansas can defy the Supreme Court or whether they can write their law in such a way that comports with the Supreme Court decision, I don't know. I'm not sure that they even care. I'm guessing that the purpose of proposing this legislation might be for some, Arkansas legislator to prove his conservative bona fides rather than to actually do something. But
it's relatively minor, but I don't know.
I don't think it's relatively minor when anybody talks about banning books.
Okay.
It's deserving of outrage and condemnation, right across the country, in my opinion.
Any book.
Yeah, I agree. Catherine, thanks for that. I'll have to look up that 82 decision. Island Tree School, you said?
Island Tree School versus Pico.
Great. I'll check it out. I've heard of the Pico decision. I'll have to read that. Catherine, thank you for the call and thanks for the information. Holbart in Pearlington, Mississippi. Hey, Holbart, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Yesterday, a guy called and mentioned David Rockefeller's autobiography.
Mm-hmm.
I read that book 8 or 9 years ago. I've been frantically scrambling around trying to find it, but the place is chaos. We had a fire a couple years ago.
Ouch.
Anyway, on page 400 and something, I can't remember exactly because it has been a while, but David Rockefeller does come right out and admit it. Yeah, we're behind the uber wealthy are behind the scenes, pulling all the levers and punching all the buttons. And they have been for some time. I mean, every Bilderberg meeting since 1954, David Rockefeller has been presiding over it. Right. He's the grandson of John D. Rockefeller, one of the original 19th century robber barons. And they're still pulling the strings. I mean, Morgan, his legacy is, of course, a lot of financial institutions, J.P. Morgan, Chase, and all that. But also General Electric.
Yeah, the thing that always concerns me, Holbert, whenever these people say, I'm in favor of a world in peace, or I'm in favor of one world, or maybe we should have, one world with one government over it, is I just keep remembering ein Reich, ein Volk, ein Führer. You know, it's like 1,000 years of peace. That was the promise of the Third Reich. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Bill in Elma, Washington. Hey, Bill, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I'm a 502 producer-processor that's been licensed by the state of Washington to produce marijuana for the recreational market. And I've just been really scared lately by the listening to Sessions and Spicer talk about the need to crack down on the states with recreational marijuana projects. And I just wanted to try to get out to the 60% of the population that does support recreational and medical marijuana, that there's two laws up right now, one called HB 975 that was put in by Republican Dana Rohrabacher along with bipartisan a couple of Democrats. It's called the Respect State Marijuana Laws Act. Right. And I would think that with this idea of the Republicans always wanting to protect states' rights, that it would be easy for the Republican Congress to get behind this. So I'm asking the public to write to their congressman, call their congressman, and let them know that they support HB 975. Also, I just heard about a new bill that's just came out. I don't know the number of it, but it's a bill to actually just take marijuana completely out of the classification system and just make it like alcohol or tobacco, which is what it should be. Yep. So those are the points that I wanted to bring across today to the public. Seems like the majority supports it, so I'm hoping the majority will get out there and get their voice known. Amen. You did a very good job of that, Bill. Thank you very much for sharing the good word. Mike in Los Angeles. Hey, Mike, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Yeah, I just wanted to say that Jay Beauregard Sessions should leave office for a couple of reasons involving the way he misled the Senate. Aside from the Russian connection, during the confirmation hearings, he promised up and down that he's no longer a racist and that he wouldn't do anything today to help limit voting rights for African Americans.
Which he's already done.
Yeah, his first official act was to kill a DOJ action against a Texas measure to suppress the vote. So I really see in him the rise of the South again, and he is redolent of the stench of the corpse of the Confederacy.
I totally agree. And if you're going to try and take down Jeff Sessions, trying to take him down because he's trying to prevent, help Texas prevent black people and brown people from voting is powerful stuff. And I just don't get why the Democrats are not willing to go after this. It just baffles me.
And interstate cross-check.
Yeah, what Chris Kobach is up to. We got to get Greg Pallas back on the program to talk about this stuff. Mike, thanks for the call. I'm totally with you. Paul in New York City. Hey, Paul, what's on your mind?
Hello?
Hey, Paul.
Hi, listen, I wanted to get your assessment on that woman, Leah Dunham, who has kind of like elected herself as a spokesman for the progressive left. And I think she's going to wind up alienating a lot of people. I'm wondering what you think about, celebrities who kind of, volunteer to I'm sure you know the things that she's saying if you don't.
I don't.
You don't?
No.
She's going down this it's all white people's problem as soon as we get rid of these white people, when she's white herself.
Right.
As soon as we get rid of these white people, then everything's going to work out. And she was on The View 2 weeks ago saying that.
Paul, I'd be amazed if anybody actually said that. It sounds to me like this is, Lena Dunham being cycled through Fox so-called news. Nobody's going to say everything's going to be fine when we get rid of all those white people. I mean, come on, Paul. Anita in Ludington, Michigan. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. Anita in Ludington, Michigan. Hey, Anita, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. I'm calling. Sometime I think this past week you were talking about Medicaid and that that seniors use it if they have long-term care, like in a nursing home.
Yes.
And I just wanted to also say that usually on low-income seniors, it also helps with their Medicare premium and with copays.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Okay.
which makes a big difference because, if they're taking any amount of medicine, most people that have Medicare realize, they're paying, a copay for all their medicine
Right.
there. And I had a question, too. I know that California has questioned whether, a single payer program for their health.
Right. There's legislation before the California legislature right now to create a single-payer system.
Yeah.
I'm guessing will probably pass.
California, I know they have a big population, and there are a lot of states that are smaller. Could smaller states actually get in on California's?
In theory, and in fact, that's my speculation, is that if California goes single-payer and they put into place a system to do it, and they certainly have the economic mass to do that. California could go single payer easy. If they do that, I think that the next step would be for Oregon and Washington State to say, we would like to join you and create a Cascadia compact, or a West Coast compact with these 3 West Coast states, and we'll all use the same infrastructure, and we'll pay you a certain amount. Oregon and Washington would pay California a certain amount for the administrative costs. But single-payer systems typically work with, less than 2% overhead, whereas our private for-profit health insurance runs 20 to 25% overhead. So
right. That's what I was wondering, because then maybe we could just talk about cascade that area, but cascade into having single-payer go around the nation.
Yeah. And single payer for the nation would save us $508 billion a year. That's how much money is being bled out of our healthcare system by for-profit health insurance companies, banksters who call themselves health insurance companies. It's a terrible thing.
And I was going to say, that's what you're saying. As Democrats, that's what we should be fighting for.
Oh, absolutely.
Like that.
And aggressively and loudly and at every opportunity. And unfortunately, we're not. I mean, we need to pick a couple of issues like the Republicans did. Hey, they're going to go after Hillary's emails. They're going to go after big government. They actually create their own straw men to go after. And, people who watch Fox News start to believe it. Oh, my God, it's Lena Dunham,
Yeah. Well, and with healthcare, we've had so many people go to like town halls and stuff. It scares people. And I've talked to people that are Republicans and have always voted Republican, that they're scared.
Yeah.
That they're going to lose their Medicare
And it's a legitimate fear. It's a legitimate fear because Paul Ryan has all but said he wants to voucherize Medicare, he wants to block grant Medicaid, and he wants to privatize Social Security. And year after year after year, Paul Ryan and the Republicans in the House have submitted budgets that would do just that. The good news is that up until now, you had President Obama, who just ignored those budgets. But it's like, this is coming. This is coming. And they're going to really try. Anita, thank you for the call. And Democrats need to be ready. Because when the Republicans start rolling out this stuff, we need to be preparing the American people right now for the consequences of the destruction of Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security that the Republicans are planning on.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with more of your calls. Anything Goes Friday right after this break here at the bottom of the hour. Stick around. If you define ISIS as a group of Wahhabist, Salafite militants who subscribe to the Wahhabist strain of Sunni Islam that has been promoted aggressively since the 1930s by the government of Saudi Arabia, where they're exporting it all over the country. They're funding madrasas all over the country. They teach the Jews literally eat and drink the blood of Muslim children. They talk about the importance of killing and destroying Israelis and that sort of thing, and Jews all over the world. if you're and this call to jihad and a greater Muslim world, et cetera, if that's how you're defining ISIS, they've been around forever. Or not forever, at least my entire lifetime. If you're defining ISIS as the group that calls itself the Islamic State, they emerged explicitly around 2004, 2005, largely in Iraq, after the George W. Bush administration went in. And keep in mind, there was not one single al-Qaeda person in Iraq when we invaded Iraq. But because Paul Bremer and Donald Rumsfeld principally, and Cheney and Bush apparently, but apparently this was Bremer and Rumsfeld and Wolfowitz, this group of libertarians, and they believed that if you got government out of the way, you would have a wonderful society. And more than half of the GDP of Iraq was government-owned industries. You had government-owned, tire factories, government-owned steel factories, government-owned cement factories, government-owned businesses. And you had to be a member of the Ba'ath Party in order to get a job, which was the non-secular, non-religious socialist party that Saddam Hussein ran. And so just a couple of weeks into the war, after the war was successful, after we took down, because the war only lasted a couple of weeks, and then the occupation began. And when the occupation began, Bush sent L. Paul Bremer over to Iraq, and they shut down all of these government-owned businesses, fired everybody. They shut down the Iraqi army, which was 500,000 men, and it was the largest employer in Iraq. And you had to be, again, a Ba'athist Party member to be in the army. They shut that down, and they did something called de-Ba'athification. In other words, they said, if you're a Ba'ath Party member, which was all Sunnis, and which ran from the intelligentsia and the professional military, people working in hospitals, all the way down to the street sweepers. If you're a Ba'ath Party member or ever have been, you may not be employed again. And so, and we're shutting down these government industries, or you may not come back into the Iraqi army. And so the consequence of this was you had millions of men, young men, who were suddenly unemployed, who had weapons abound, and were seriously PO'd. And they cut all the government programs. Saddam Hussein had a program that was similar to our Social Security that took care of people in old age. And it was a fairly generous program. We did away with that. Saddam had a program that was the equivalent of food stamps, the subsidized food for people of low income. We did away with that. Saddam had a program of national health care. We did away with that. Saddam had a program of free public education, including college. We did away with that. And the theory was, when we did away with all of this stuff, that now Iraq is a clean slate and the libertarian experiment can proceed, and government and corporations and billionaires from all over the world are going to flood into Iraq, or indigenous Iraqis will emerge who will create a flourishing new economy, and we will prove that libertarian ideology is right. And instead what happened was chaos. And out of that chaos came al-Qaeda. And then out of the al-Qaeda group, al-Qaeda came in, but a lot of these Sunnis just said, okay, screw that. I'm with al-Qaeda now because I'm no longer with Saddam Hussein. Or I just no longer have a job. And then al-Qaeda, you had these internal divisions in al-Qaeda, and one of them was Anbar al-Awlaki, as I recall. And he started what became ISIL, the Islamic State in the Levant, or the Islamic State originally it was called the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. And that was in 2005, with the explicit name. In 2006, they started becoming a real force. And by 2008, they were, they had a presence in 4 countries. So, and this was all before Obama came along. So, Trump and the Republicans are engaging in some radical revisionist history. There would be no ISIL unless if George W. Bush had not lied us into the war in Iraq. It's just that simple. George W. Bush created ISIS.
Wouldn't that be considered war crimes? I mean, when you think about all the stuff that he did, what you just described, and then all the men and women that were killed from our country, plus all the men and women that were killed from their country, and then all the veterans that you're talking about not too long ago, how many are killing themselves because of what's been going on now in Afghanistan, and it's all related. To me, George W. Bush is a war criminal. I mean, they're still looking for 90-year-old Nazis, which they should. well, why are we letting George W. and all his cohorts get away with what they got away with?
Well, the answer to that question is a whole nother rant, but we are letting them get away with it. And Vince Bugliosi, who just died a few months ago, wrote a brilliant book called The Prosecution of George W. Bush for Murder, which was turned into a movie. I recommend them both to you, Laura. Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and it's Anything Goes Friday. Sonia in Redding, California. Hey, Sonia, what's on your mind today?
Hi, I'm calling about HB 622, which is a companion bill to HB 621, and that was the bill where the 3.1 or 3.3 million acres of land was that Jason Chaffetz was advocating for got struck down.
Right.
The companion bill 622 is the funding, and it is proceeding. And what would happen is the funding would go from the federal level to the states level, and I've read that environmentalists are concerned that that would decimate the lands.
Right. Yeah. If they can't sell off the public lands, they want to stop administering them and stop protecting them and, kind of force the states into the process. I'm not super knowledgeable about this, what's going on with this, Sonia, but it's something that we need to pay attention to. And with our new Interior Secretary, Ryan Zinke, I think his name is, who is himself, in favor of selling off all these lands to, whoever has enough money to buy them.
Right. And I think this is the patrolling of the lands, as well as 622 is the funding.
Yeah.
For that. But I also wanted to mention for HB 622, I'm hoping that especially people in Utah will contact Jason Chaffetz.
Yeah, that's a good idea, number one. And number two, I'm guessing that the Democrats in the Senate will not allow this through, but we need to keep a close eye on this because stuff starts happening fast and furious or bills like this end up getting turned into basically amendments to big budget bills that have to pass, and that's how nasty stuff happens, with some regularity. Right. Sonia, thank you. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank
Excellent information. I appreciate it. Karen in Winter Haven, Florida. Hey, Karen, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Last week, I believe it was, on Democracy Now!, there was an author named Sheila Kolhatar who's written a book called Black Edge, and it's inside information, dirty money, and the quest to bring down the most wanted man on Wall Street. She had an interesting thing to say at the end of the program that sent a red flag up for me, that apparently the chief counsel for this Stephen A. Cohen big hedge fund crook, insider trader, was picked up by the Trump administration to man the DOJ. And I just wanted to put that out there for you. You may want to get her on the show or something. But what would that mean, bringing all these inside traders into the DOJ?
Whoa. I don't know. This is not my beat, Karen. I'm not familiar with the details on this. But who's doing good research and good writing on this?
On what?
On this topic that you're talking about.
Well, the author's name of that particular book is Sheila Kolhatar. I think she's a friend of, is it Brittany McLean, the one that's well known for doing Wall Street?
Yeah, I'm not sure. The name sounds familiar, but I'll have to look into it. So the story is hedge fund managers infiltrating themselves into the Department of Justice?
Well, what Trump did, according to her, at the end of her book, is pick up his chief counsel to help him recruit for the Department of Justice. Mm-hmm. Defenders of inside traders,
right?
The only thing I can think is that nothing will be enforced.
Yeah. Well, that's already happening, but I'm going to have to look into this more, Karen. I'm sorry, I don't have the detail to be able to offer you an informed opinion right now.
Yeah, Black Edge is the book.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I'll check it out. I appreciate the call. Linda in Spokane, Washington. Hey, Linda, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I wanted to expand the narrative of single-payer health care to take it away from Canada, which has an awesome system, but to actually mention the fact that our own military has a single-payer health care plan where we pay for the doctors' education. They don't get paid by the procedure. They get a rank pay, which is pretty good,
right,
but it's not by the procedure. They have their own hospitals paid for by the taxpayers, and that goes for all dependents of the military also, their wives, their widows, their children. I was born in a military hospital, and when my mother was a widow, my brother was born in a military hospital, and that's it.
Yeah. Well, Linda, there's one subtle distinction that I would make here in your analysis, and spot on, by the way, and that is that there are basically two kinds, arguably three kinds. I've used the Swiss, but I think the Swiss system is kind of an anomaly. So there's basically two kinds of government-run health care. And we have both of them in the United States. And one is what the British have with their National Health Service, where which I've used and is pretty impressive. The National Health Service in Britain, the government owns the hospitals. All of the doctors, all the physicians and nurses are government employees. They work for a paycheck rather than by the procedure, as you described in the VA. And that's considered socialized medicine or some variation on it. I mean, the British would push back and say, no, this isn't complete socialism. But, that's a system where the government actually owns the facility and hires the people. With a single-payer system, all the government does is write the checks. So you still have privately owned hospitals. You still have physicians who are setting their own rates and have their own private practices. Doctors and nurses are generally still being paid by the procedure rather than a paycheck. And the single-payer system that we have in the United States is called Medicare. And so, Medicare is quite different from the VA, and you can see all the differences. They're not Medicare hospitals. There are not Medicare doctors. It's just a payment system. Whereas the VA, you're right, is this entire closed ecosystem that is more like socialized medicine. But the bottom line, the net is that they both work better than what we have.
Right. But I was talking about military bases all over the world, and especially in our own country, that one of the things they do is they say that we don't have enough doctors. Well, they train their own doctors, and they don't pay them by the procedure.
Right. Yeah, no, it's a great system, and it works. And the VA has the highest level of happiness with your healthcare system of all the systems in the United States. And number two is Medicare, and which is single payer. So people like socialized medicine, and they like Medicare. What they don't like is being told, hey, you just hit your lifetime limit, you're going to have to go ahead and die. But that's what we've got, or that's what we had until Obamacare, and that's what the Republicans want to take us back to. Linda, thank you for the call. Well said. Very well said. Jan in Box Springs, Georgia. Hey, Jan, what's on your mind?
I just wanted to ask you if you think the Trump administration is moving toward a draft military.
I would be very surprised if they did. I think we should. Charlie Rangel's come on this program about once a year for the last 14 years to talk, who fought in Korea, to talk about how important it would be to bring the draft back so that when decisions of war are being made in Congress, the members of Congress will be thinking in terms of their own kids going over there rather than, just, hey, it's somebody who will, to paraphrase Thomas Jefferson, is being willing to, be shot at for a sixpence. So I think we should have a draft, and I think that it should have a civilian option. That if you give a year of your life to your country, either in the military or in a hospital or any other nonprofit, then in exchange for that, you get a free college education. I think that we should tie the two, and as they've done in several European countries. Makes sense?
Okay. And one quick question: are you familiar with an organization called Green America?
I'm not.
It's a wonderful organization. they just work for a social, economic, and environmental justice around the world and in the United States. And they're on the internet. You know, anyone can look them up. But they're truly a wonderful group.
Green America. Okay, I'll check it out. Jen, thank you very much for the information. Thanks for the call, and thanks for listening to Sirius XM. We'll be back coming up on 15 minutes before the hour. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls right after this. And welcome back. Let's see here. Marty in Nickerson, Nebraska. Hey, Marty, what's on your mind today? Marty, watching us on YouTube? I'm sorry, John, watching us on YouTube in Nickerson, Nebraska.
Oh, hi, Tom.
Hey, John.
Oh, I love your show.
Thank you. What's on your mind?
I have a really hard time talking with conservatives when they start to parrot all the so-called news talking points.
Mm-hmm.
So I was wondering if maybe I could give you a talking point.
Okay.
Voter suppression, Chris Kobach, all that stuff, it just boils my blood. And maybe we should start calling that voter regulation.
Ah! Oh, yeah, they hate regulations.
Conservatives hate regulation. Let's make the conservatives understand we are regulating the voters with all those laws.
Right. Voter regulations. That's a good one, John. That's a good one. You get an A for creativity here, and yeah, it's a meme that's worth promoting. I'm with you, John. Thanks for the call. That's a great suggestion. Jim in Sacramento, in Sacramento. Hey, Jim, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, I was just calling in over the summer as we went through the election process. At one time, you said, "Gee, Ireland, we got to get some calls about Ireland," and I heard that, and I said, well, I'm going to call you one day. But I wanted to wait until after the election period because that really was what's primarily.
So tell me about Ireland.
About. But today's program, you started out with the history of the CIA and all that stuff, and I thought I'd give you a call. My family's been involved in this stuff with Ireland back about 5 centuries. So the family is known as the intelligence group. And in olden days, we were the Druids, actually. Mm-hmm. And that stayed right throughout the rebellion period, starting with, just picking up in the 1850s. There was an organization called the Irish Republican Brotherhood. And then finally it ends in a successful rebellion. And the intelligence for all of that was in the hands of a fellow named Eamon Duggan. Now, a lot of people want to credit that to Michael Collins, but Collins just took care of the intelligence for the IRA Army during the last year of the function. But from the beginning of the rebellion, from 1916 forward, it was in the hands of Eamon Duggan. Now, his family was all throughout Ireland, and all throughout Ireland had served all the 9 different kings that were the rulers of Ireland through the history. Mm-hmm. And when he was in Dublin, he was a lawyer, and his office was just outside Dublin Castle. But here's what I'm pointing out to the infiltration. In the Dublin Castle, the head of secretarial functions, which is the nerve center for, an organization, that was Tom Duggan. So it was a cousin of his. And over here in the United States, there was Stephen Duggan, who was actually the person that promoted the League of Nations to Wilson and followed that up all the way through FDR and the creation of the United Nations. Okay? Now, this is a very curious thing. We're seeing parallel runs in history where we're having this right-wing group that thinks they deserve power, even though they know that.
Jim, we're out of time. I'm sorry, but thank you for the call. Hey, thanks so much to our show director, Louise Hartman, to our executive producer, Sean Taylor, to our video director, Chris Mendelis, the radio and TV producer, Troy Miller, to our phone screener, Nate Atwell, to our writer-researcher, Nate Sweet, to our webmasters, Nigel Peacock and Jamie Holly, our business manager, Ron Hartenbaum, all the folks at the great companies that syndicate this program, Digital Media, Pacifica Radio, Sirius XM Satellite Radio, Cable Radio Network, Free Speech TV on Dish Network, Direct TV, and all the cable providers who carry our show, including Manhattan Neighborhood Network, all the others around the country, to all the great folks at Free Speech TV and RT TV who work on the big picture, to the Progressive Voices channel on TuneIn, to Netroots Radio, to our newsletter editor, Sue Nethercutt, to all the folks in our chat room. Hey, to Ellen Ratner, Victoria Jones, Bob Ney, and everyone at Talk Media News, to Jay Goodman-Tamboli for tech support, to our affiliates, our sponsors, and to you for supporting our program. Thank you. Thank you so much. Let's see here. Marty in Evergreen Park, Illinois. Hey, Marty, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Happy Friday. Thanks for taking my call.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out to the listeners and remind people whenever they start talking about Hillary Clinton's email server versus like what Mike Pence was doing, Hillary Clinton had her own private email server. The end of those series of tubes led to that machine. She was in control of that machine and that media. When you're using like a service like AOL or Gmail to conduct business, anybody can open up that, have access to those email boxes. Anybody that works at AOL, if they wanted to, they could open up that and find it out right away. There's a huge difference. So if people are really harping on Hillary Clinton for her use of a private email server that she had full control over.
Hers was much more secure than Scott Pruitt's or Mike Pence's.
Mike Pence.
Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's an important point to make. And I just find it so ironic that Mike Pence and Scott Pruitt were both, gung-ho for, lock her up and all this other kind of nonsense with regard to Hillary Clinton. And then, what they're doing is far less secure than what she did. And there's no evidence that her server was ever even hacked. Whereas Mike Pence actually, his AOL or Gmail account, whatever it was, that did get hacked. And Scott Pruitt was using a private account to do business with polluting companies, and to lobby the EPA. It's just nuts. Marty, thank you. That's a good point. It's an important point to make. Norma in Montgomery, Alabama. Hey, Norma, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Dr. Tom. I have a friend in Texas that called me, and he said his governor isn't a lather to go ahead and call for this Constitution Convention.
Yes.
And he cannot find out anything about this new Constitution they want. But they believe they have the votes. And do you know of anybody who has any idea what this new Constitution will have in it, other than maybe property owners get to vote and nobody else does?
The principal message that I've seen, and this is being led by a website that you can find. It's online, conventionofstates.com. And that Convention of States is owned by a conservative group that has close ties to ALEC and to the Koch brothers. And
I've seen their stuff, but this is a person I know in Texas.
Right. And what I've read,
he called me.
What I've read that their principal bugaboo is, the main thing that they want to change in the Constitution, is the use of the Commerce Clause. Bobby Kennedy started using the Commerce Clause to enforce immigration laws, and civil rights laws. It horrified the southern states, but he said, hey, if you've got ketchup at your counter and that ketchup came from Heinz in Pennsylvania, you are engaged in interstate commerce and the federal government can regulate you. The Commerce Clause has been used to regulate child labor. It's been used to regulate all kinds of things. And the Supreme Court back in the 30s used to say that this was all unconstitutional. They changed their tune on that regard in 37. But this is what these guys want to take us back to. They want to say that the Commerce Clause is very, very limited in its scope and that the federal government can't use it this way. And basically, they want to make it so that the federal government can't do things like have the EPA. It can't, because the EPA is, technically engaged in anything that has to do with interstate commerce, the EPA can touch, right? And so, although it's expanded even beyond that. But there's a pretty good entry about this over at SourceWatch. If you go to sourcewatch.org and plug in Convention of States, and they will, they'll feed you back the information along with the statements that have been made by these groups. And they had last year here in Washington, D.C., they came to D.C. and they did a mock constitutional convention, a dress rehearsal. And they had people from all 50 states here. They only need 34 states to call the convention and 38 states to ratify it. And they want to, basically rewrite our entire Constitution, and they're that close to it. I've been working on a piece on this for a couple of weeks. I think this is a big deal, and what makes me absolutely nuts is that there are a couple of liberals out there who are saying, oh, yeah, we need a constitutional convention, as if the Koch brothers will not sweep down on this thing. It's crazy. Article 5 provides 2 ways to amend the Constitution. One is by taking an amendment and having 38 states approve it, and then it becomes an amendment to the Constitution. It doesn't even have to go through Congress. And the other way is to have 34 states call a convention, and then after that convention is over, 38 states can ratify that new convention. And again, Congress has no say over it, and we've just completely rebooted the DNA of the United States. That latter strategy of calling the Constitutional Convention, I think, is suicide for any progressive, and a terrible, terrible idea. And which is why the Koch brothers and their buddies are pushing so hard to make it happen. So, Norma, I'm going to follow up on this more in the following week or so. Like I said, I've been working on this article about it for a month now.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
I'm concerned, and my friend is highly concerned.
Yeah, well, count me into the highly concerned category. I'm extremely concerned about it.
I don't qualify as a white male, and I'm not going to give up my right to vote.
There you go. Okay, Norma. There you go. Thank you very much for the call. Nick in Winona, Mississippi. Hey, Nick, what's on your mind today?
Hey, how you doing, man?
Good. What's up?
I am thinking that what we're seeing right now with the Mike Pence and the Jeff Sessions thing, the intelligence community is playing a game of long-range chess. First, they went after the wackadoodle, Flynn. He's gone.
Right.
Now they're trying to knock down the one guy that could stop all the investigations, Jeff Sessions.
Right.
Once they succeed getting rid of him, it's chess. Then they're going to go after the bigger fish. I think this is what the intelligence community is doing. This is their way of getting back at them.
So you're seeing right now the deep state fighting back. Is that your point?
Yes.
Against Trump?
Against the whole administration.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, there's certainly, if you define the deep state as the intelligence agencies and the military-industrial complex.
Not just them, but the civil servants.
Well, that are associated with those intelligence agencies.
Yes.
Yeah. But on the other hand, Trump wants to hand them an extra $54 billion. I mean, he's sucking up to these guys as fast as he can. And it may be that he's a little nervous about them.
Well, I think he's trying to give them money not to the civil servants, but to the contractors.
Correct.
I'm talking about the people that are actually doing the investigations, the
right.
people that keeps the intelligence community going.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, I've read several pieces about this. Jacobin magazine had a piece about it a while ago, and there's a piece over at, I'm forgetting the name of the other magazine. But anyhow, there's some good writing on this topic, Nick, and it's worth, sticking into a search engine, deep state. How it's going to play out, I don't know. We'll wait and see. Anyhow, it's been a great week. Thanks so much for being with us this week, and we'll be back next week. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. Get out there, get active, tag You're It. Have a wonderful weekend.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates. helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeats.com.